Wheat Harvest America projected lowest in 149 years, money supply highest in 250 years. That intersection in the middle means everything you buy this summer and forward is going to cost you more money, especially food. So we need to ask ourselves, with all these strange hail events happening across the planet, is this related to El Nino? Because there's a known correlation or connection between extreme hail and extreme El Nino. We're coming into it. It's official now. It's begun. It's supposed to be intense. So this is the forecast through the end of 2026. Then we have the wild card here of all the low Earth orbit, your communication network satellites for your internet, so you can have free internet while you're camping. Awesome. It's starting to surround the planet to this vastness here. It's getting absolutely insane. If you knew the true number and how many are re-entering, because they're putting up new ones, that the ones from 2021 are now not they're not nearly as technically savvy. So they're just bringing them out of orbit by putting up all these new ones. That, in addition, is going to put an enormous amount more fireballs up there for us to see re-entering. In addition to whatever that signal broadcast is down on the entire planet at the same time, you need to ask yourself what that could possibly do to us, our plant life. You know, that much beaming signal down across the entire planet in unison, except for the poles, from pole to shining pole, is covered with soon to be hundreds of thousands of satellites, all beaming down Wi-Fi signal. So imagine the changes of vastness in the forest and plant life, amphibian life, and you, human life, and me. What is that really doing to the ecosystem is the question. Nobody's really studied that. It's never been studied at such a thing. I encourage you to take a look at the different studies that they've done, growing plants next to a Wi-Fi router or not, and see the difference in vegetative growth. And then you start maybe putting the correlation together here, like there might be something that 1 equals 1. If our crop yields are declining, is it truly from shifting jet streams and moisture patterns, or is it also a bit of signal beaming down that's also interfering with the crop growing areas, crop growth itself, the maturation of plants, and all the different parts of and stages of plant growth? Not a lot of studies been done on that, but the crop losses we're experiencing now are coming in really heavy this year. You're looking at the prices of wheat skyrocketing. So let's talk about winter wheat for a second here. Black line is where we are. Green 2021, not such a stellar year either, but we are going to blow through that green line. There's been no rain. Also, the contiguous, this is off the Palmer Drought Index and the contiguous US where the red arrow is. And if you take that red arrow and you just draw it left, the last time it was this intense of a drought during planting season was Dust Bowl era. And dropping in on El Nino, a well-known crop affector is happening as we speak. We're switching from La Nina into neutral into super El Nino forecast for later in the summer into early autumn, super Nino. And you can look how the impacts on crops. So I'm looking in the red and the orange, and all I see is, yeah, that's a problem through India, parts of Africa, especially Australia, and they're already having fuel shortages. So what do you think is going to happen with crop production in Australia? I'm going to say, well, not much. So get expected for prices up there, especially with their wheat. So, you know, there's a problem when the actual restaurants are telling you that the food they're buying is just so ridiculous expensive that they cannot pass that cost on to you in a restaurant setting because you just simply won't pay it. So they're closing. You've seen all these reports of fast food now costing $20 to go out per person, equivalent of what you could get in a restaurant. So where's that going to leave us? During COVID, everybody ran over to the fast food to survive because everything was closed. You had to wait in line. Now, from the top down and the bottom up, the only thing that's left in the middle. If the fast food's getting 20 bucks a person, the top's too expensive to even sell, the restaurants are closed, then where does that leave? The sandwich of the economy, no pun intended. People are going to move as they always have in history. So where are they going to move to and why? Let's jump over to the United States. how our land is used and what is grown comparatively to what you might think it is. It's that big yellow right there, cow and pasture range. You think beef would be incredible cheap. We got livestock feed, which is corn mainly. Food we eat, that is different types of corn and wheat that's being grown. Feed exports, again, that's more on the like dent corn types of things, and sorghums, ethanol, biodiesels, and you can see what our timberlands look like as well. Nice overview of how the country's used, and just generally, if you're going to choose a spot where food's getting prohibitively expensive, where would you move to is the question. So the reason I ask, I saw this off the New York Post, and some of Texas' most famous barbecue joints forced to close due to sky-high beef prices. Had to dig into that further, so I went off to the article. And restaurant owners, again, when brisket costs $36 a pound for the consumer, when you got ribs and sausages and sides and desserts, you're easily at $70 to $100 for a barbecue. Okay, looking at the beautiful image there, love the food. That feeds two. You're with a family of four, double that. So how many times are you going to take your family out there to eat? And then looking at the ground beef prices, up 15% from a year ago. And pitmasters say wholesale brisket prices now $5 to $6 a pound before smoking. Once you trim that off, 40% goes away. The restaurants are charging as much as $35, $40 a pound. People just aren't going to pay that. And then, of course, they got margins, and they got to sit at $40 to break even. So we have the first casualty of food costs. Restaurants need margin, and it's thin anyway. But when you go to these prices and you're looking at that, okay, your total demographic, how many of them can spend $200 to bring a family out for barbecue plus tip? Yeah, I mean, you took a wide margin and you shrunk it into just a sliver. And again, that'll be only a nice treat once in a while. It's not going to be a staple. So they choose to close. Meaning our food choices and choices to be able to go find food is shrinking. And the cattle chute, no pun intended, is going to funnel us in a certain direction. So know your local farmer is my best set of advice here. You know, if you're around anywhere in a farming community, you can always find somebody who's raising cattle or hogs, sheep, chicken, whatever, and go out, talk to them directly at the farm. That's going to be one way to beat a lot of these prices here. And then you might find another 1, 2, 3, 4 people who want to split a whole cow, like 1,200 pound full beef, and there's 4 people. Okay, you'll take a quarter each. You know, there's different ways to do this. You don't have to buy an entire, animal, but you can fill out the cut sheet, that sort of thing. That's one way to move around this. Because up in Kashmir, they're getting pounded by out of season strange hail. And this is getting into the whole livestock industry. They're talking about how heavy the hail is, how much damage is being done. But, we're looking at India, and, they are no stranger to cataclysms and disruptions in food production. I mean, look at this temple buried in sands here along a river, excavated, and then will it be reburied in the next set of food debacles when people disappear for 200-300 years and they don't live there because they need to go where the food's growing, and then this is covered back in sands again, is the question. But the main question is, how do people change their overall spending habits when these prices keep rising? Well, a good number one is cut back on spending. Well, what do you cut back on? You're going to have to do your own personal assessment on that. 25% of the people, though, said that I have not changed spending habits at all, and then 7.4% said they're spending more. So that 75% is the target demographic that is driving a lot of the change when restaurateurs are pulling the plug. And people are going to move also. It's just a thing in history. When a resource is not available or you're priced out or something happens, people move to different locations where they can have a better quality of life. It's been like that for 8,000 years. Nothing new. This is the norm, not the exception. So I don't have the 2026 data yet. This is just 2025. I'm looking at the dark blue and the black on the states there, saying those are most affordable, best quality of life, and most freedom to do with what you want on your land, obviously, to produce food. So we got Idaho, South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, up in Maine also, but Missouri. So you can see these are kind of like the hot spot. they're hot now because they're affordable, but when like a tidal wave of people rolls in, just like anything else, it makes it more expensive. So you can at least see right now where people have chosen the best safety spots in America by state. So there's your map. Choose wisely, because real wages start to shrink in developed countries. Now, this is a Strait of Hormuz. Obviously, AI is coming in, and they put inflation at 3.6, April 3.8. And then if we look at the adjusted dollar growth over the last 30 years, you're adding this in on top of all these other things. Inflation running hot, less jobs available, just things costing more in general, house prices up. And then you follow the red line down on your purchasing power. So at the same time inflation's going up, the amount you can purchase with is also decreasing from that same dollar. And when we're in the feedback loop, let's take a moment of Zen. Is this a wheat field? Could be. Use your imagination, because the top wheat exporters for 2024, 2025, again, we don't have the 2026 numbers out yet, but I am sure this is going to move a little bit. So the top exporters there: Russia, EU, Canada, Australia, and United States. The reason I say that is because Australia is in this crazy mega drought. West Australia is not getting planted. They're talking about 10 to maybe 13 million tons down out of Australian exports. So they might even fall off that top 5 list. United States, just dust bowl conditions happening out in the Midwest grow belt with our wheat. So we might fall off that top 5 position. Canada will get knocked down too, because anywhere they're growing wheat, they're experiencing the same drought conditions in North America. But here's the thing to look at: the importers on the side there. Egypt, Indonesia, China, Turkey, Algeria, the most vulnerable countries for disruption based on, well, they're either going to pay the prices or they're going to have to switch crops. And that's really another choice you have too. You can switch the things that you're used to eating. So if they're not unable to afford the wheat, or the wheat goes 2-3 times the pricing, are they going to switch over to something different like millet or amaranth or spelt or some of these more ancient grains? They're not really grown commercially, but I bet they will be if they can come in under a certain price point. Sorghum, again, America, we were at 100-year lows a couple of years ago. But can countries switch? I mean, rice, if it gets expensive, could Asian countries switch that staple rice dish out for something else? Maybe corn. I don't know, but there's going to be a lot of switching going on. And you and your lives as well, if you can think about the things that you are buying that you could substitute for something. I mean, maybe you could buy oatmeal and find some clean oatmeal. That's much cheaper than a lot of other things that could be purchased out there in terms of pastas or different types of wheat products. If you're looking at just base staples like flours and that sort of thing to bake your own breads, that's another way to go. If instead of spending $7, $8, $10 for an artesian loaf at a bakery somewhere, coffee shop, why don't you just learn how to bake the bread yourself at home? I mean, we're going to have to go back to these cost-saving measures here for many people. I'm not going to say everybody, but for many. How's that going to work? I mean, you got to look at your budget and then see how you can substitute that out. Now, we're on the slow grind here. By probably August, it's not going to be much of a choice anymore. Once the crop tours come in, things are just going to get a little bit crazy, because they're going to go out in the fields and go, oh, that's really only 10% of what we expected it to come in at. Farmers are going to till that under. They'll take the crop insurance. So there's going to be way less wheat out on the market, because the farmers are going to choose to take the insurance on it versus trying to take a scrappy half yield out to market and lose money on it. They're all going to take the insurance. Wouldn't you? Would you lose money? No, you wouldn't. You would take the insurance and make money for the year. So how many millions of acres will that take offline? And then how will that drive the price? In addition to the acres that didn't get planted yet, plus the drought. The food is about to get crazy. A lot of things in the whole economy are about to get, well, let's say fragile for the best term. There's a lot of opportunity in this if you can see where it's going. But again, there's nowhere to run from the system anymore. It is totally all-encompassing, and it got this way before anybody noticed. It's like when there was a tidal wave. I saw a couple of 2011 videos the last few days in Japanese tsunami. You could see it way out there because the wave was rather large. Some of these waves were coming in at like 20 meters or like 60 feet. You could see them. This is like we're turning around and it's just right here above us and we didn't see it coming. Starting out with this chart, not commonly available, all the way back to 1850 on the bottom left. You can see intensity of El Nino and La Nina through time since 1850. We are at the top right, about to stretch up into the 3 degrees Celsius above, into the heat. Well, where have we seen that before? The 1870s, intensely right around 1869, and again 1877. 1980 for us on the chart up there, and then the super spikes that we've seen again in 1998, 99, and 2015. Aside from that, that's all we have to go on is those intense 5 or 6. Reason I wanted to bring this up is these hail reports are growing across the United States. It's either going to be less frequent or more frequent, the storm intensity, the droughts. But there is a relationship between a developing El Nino and how much hail we get. So moving forward, the newest as of this week, what the forecast strength is going to be, for sure, 1,000%, we're looking at September, October, November, and even a little before, but the most intense, October through January, that's where the darkest red are, right in the center there. If we start over to the left to chart May, June, July, that's where we are now. It's onsetting. Some effects are being seen, but not to the intensity that we'll see coming into autumn this year. But they show June, July, and August, the ramp up. So we're officially in the ramp up period, and July, August, September, the third bar there, it really starts to get intense. A lot of extra precipitation, moisture. Coral Reef Watch Daily got you on the red, looking at around 5C coastal off of South America, west side into the Pacific. That's going to begin stretching further afield here. Newest update on the 13th, just picked this one up a couple days ago. So the intensity continues from the 1st to the 15th, about 15-day increment there. And with that being said, we got the intensifying El Nino, that flips weather patterns. We've been trading grains on this for almost 200 years on the planet. People know that plant crops, where it's going to take away moisture, where it's going to push moisture. We're in this transition period now, and it's starting to show itself with the hail events. Going to glimpse a few with you here, and you can see the intensity of where it is on the map, where it's showing more moisture coming through. And as we get into the middle of the summer and coming into autumn, we're going to see some real anomalies happening in terms of, well, infrastructure and also our food availability, just based on not only the fertilizer that thankfully the Hormuz Strait is open, but that damage is done. We're already way deep into the planting season. It's going to be 30 days, 90 days out till they get more fertilizer. So this whole season's kind of a write-off. Now we have these natural events that are overlayering, but they're a known event, La Nina, El Nino. I mean, this has been, again, used by countries to protect themselves through the centuries on how their climate shifts, wetter, drier, and what they can expect moving forward. Food production, 2 centuries is a long time to figure this out. So we got it pretty well wired down. So what comes next? The hail is what comes next. So I'm going to bring you up on here on the world map, wet, dry, pretty easy to see. Brown's dry, green's wet. We're going to drop you over into the Middle East, Caspian Sea Basin area in Turkey right now for you. And the intensity of the hail is, starting to ramp up here. But here's the thing. It's this uniform hail, pea size or so. There's a little bit larger, but it's almost like snow falling. This is what we're starting to see around the planet, pretty much exactly the same sized hail, which is interesting in almost every of the videos, except for a couple outliers. The hail is exactly the same size. Well, this would be expected if you're looking at a phenomenon that's going to pull the globe. And this is in Armenia, one of the larger examples of the hail. But you start to see how this will affect agriculture too, breaking through the greenhouses, smashing crops in the fields, knocking everything off. Like I say, these larger events are in regions that you wouldn't expect that, like Armenia, and going off into more desert areas. But you can see how the agriculture damage. Now notice the hail size here. It's a lot uniform pea gravel sized hail, which seems to be becoming the norm anywhere that you're looking at hail damage. It's the perfect size that I keep talking about. This is all I'm seeing is this type of hail. The pea gravel size is the standard now. So if we're looking at precipitation or dryness, if you will, that was just along the Caspian Sea Basin. And then if you want to add in dryness forecasts as well, in addition to where the hail's coming down, where the wet on the map was shown, you're going to get that type of hail. Just plan for it. Now, we're also going to have the dry events here. So as you come into December, January, February, this is how our, North America is going to be affected here. Dry up in the west with some North American monsoon action, four corners, and further up California there on the mountain range. And when you look at the forecast for 3 months, it matches up with that, bringing us out to pretty much September 1st. Again, what's ahead of schedule is these anomalies that are happening. They're 2 months at least ahead of where they should be. So this is for you back on the 7th of June. The greens are anywhere from, 10, 12, 15 degrees Fahrenheit below the normal temperatures, which show that something unusual is there. Then we got the snowfall across these same areas. Not expected, except it would be expected during the El Nino onset. Like something's shifting before, and we're already into the onset of it. So is this going to be much more intense as we work our way down through the year? Bring it back to the map again here. This time over Europe, you can see Southern Europe, Spain, all the way over to again in Turkey. And then that northern blob there encompasses parts of Germany, Switzerland, etc. And for a little bit deeper dive in that region, El Nino event, summer analysis, June, July, August, this is where you're going to get your extra precipitation. And anywhere there's high mountains between France and Germany, Italy and Switzerland, then you come over into the Balkans and you get up, wafting up through Croatia into Bulgaria and Romania. This is a very telling map here. Now, if it does go to the point where instead of having a lot of rain events, we're going to have a lot more hail events, then that changes the dynamic for agriculture as well. A lot of rain's one thing, a lot of hail is something else. And if this is indeed true, this connection between increased hail events and increased intensity of El Niños, then here we go. Swinging up to Italy, like I said, North Italy, this is what they're getting up there. This same type, scene, copy paste again. And it's almost the same photo that you'd be looking at regardless of the destination. Here we are in Bulgaria. Again, you get the same type of, again, crop destroying, an indication that something has definitely started anew in the atmosphere. And where it lays is where it stays. So the green on your map, you really take a look at the planetary view here and swinging it over to the far right of the chart there into Japan. And I know China's had its share of crazy storms this year, South Korea as well, but I got some southern Japan, again, images coming out, the same types of, what do you see? This connected hail phenomenon is what I'm going to call, like a global hail phenomenon, where areas that don't normally get hail are getting it. The overall homogenization across the planet of it being more hail events than there would be extreme rain events. So again, I'll leave it up to you to judge, see what you've seen here. And the main thing is, does it give us an indication on how intense this is going to get over the next 6 to 9 months? Is this why the world's scrambling to achieve something new in advance of this? Is this going to be another layer of disruption? Strait of Hormuz open, great, fertilizer will come for next season, but it's disrupted this season. Now what's growing in the fields, every time there's a storm, instead of it just being rain, intense rains and intense winds, what if it becomes hail events? 100,000 acres over there destroyed, 50,000 acres over there. And as this rolls through, as the crops get more mature, our fruits get more mature, stripped off the trees. And I would encourage you to take a look, freeze that frame on the greens to see where it is going to be. I bet as we look through the end of the year, keep your eyes peeled for the hail events because they are a signal. There's just so many happening. And I know it's springtime, but this is way above the normal, far more widespread than the normal that you'd see in a regular year by orders of magnitude, not just, oh, it's about double what it was last year. It's off the charts where it's hard to keep up with the amount of hail events. I could bring you more and more and more. I'm going to focus on China next. But something is definitely signaling you, like a starting gun, that we're about to shift into something new. So how does that work for pricing and inflation and availability? We're already having destruction on that side anyway from this Strait of Hormuz, Gulf debacle. So where does it take us to next? That's the question. Wisconsin food prices increased 7.5% ahead of 4th of July. Wait a minute, I thought our inflation was running at 3-something%. Total cost of 12 food items to host a summer cookout for 10 people, $75.50 in Wisconsin. Highest total for the summer since it began measuring in 2013. Not really a long sample size on that. I bet if we went back to 1970s and adjusted for inflation, it'd be higher, but you know, it is what it is. Minimum wage, Pennsylvania, $7.25 an hour. Auntie Annie's soft pretzel at the mall, $7.29 plus tax, of course. Minus tax on your $7.25 for wages. That's where it diverges most. Imagine telling somebody that an hour of their time is worth less than a pretzel, and I would say, don't think you're special there. Pound of ground beef costs more than federal minimum wage from money.com. Covered a couple of these stories back over the months as it was running up into these. There's probably 50 of these comparisons we can do now. But I do want to put it into context here. Why is everything so inflationary at the moment? Picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, picture's worth 4,500. I know it's around 4,000 now, but give me some leeway with the slide. Gold price 2026, that big stack of money on the left. Gold price 1933, some change and a couple bucks on the right. This is why your inflation's running hot. Why you're going to pay more for everything. And you can just imagine as it takes hold even more, this Strait of Hormuz thing is not finished in any way, shape, or form. The knock-on effects are talking 7-9 months before it comes and we hit the peak of the inflation. So we're really just starting to see it now, especially through the summer months. You're going to be driving, gasoline is going to cost more, motor oils, fuels, repair things for the car, and the fluids are going to cost you more. Food's going to be more expensive. Everything, it's just prepare for this inflation wave. So whatever you need to do to cut costs in certain areas of your life to be able to afford others, you're going to have to start to prepare and put that into motion right now because it's here. We're no longer waiting for this inflation to arrive. Now you go to the store every week and you're seeing price increases. So just an FYI out there, if you have a plan B, you probably want to put it into play right about now. Because the world's largest meat supplier shuts down 2 plants in America, bad for beef lovers, good for automation and shareholders. JBS confirms plant closures, thousands impacted. First paragraph there, Sutterton, Pennsylvania, and a value-added facility in Memphis, Tennessee. These are lumped into, I guess, one category because if you look in the paragraph directly below that, Pilgrim's Pride closing in Chattanooga. So it's actually 3 areas, but somehow they've said 2. You do the math with that. I guess it's creative accounting. The company said the closures are part of a targeted network change aimed at strengthening operations moving forward. Creative accounting, get the share prices up. People out, 1,485 workers, bye-bye. We're going to automate you. You knew it was coming. That was a plan B that should have been put in motion, according to JBS. Thanks for the warning. And Kerry putting out the info here for us. Average beef price, ground beef, year 2000, $2.01 for a pound. That's the kind of prices I remember. And it would be on sale for like 85 cents in the summer. 2026, $6.74, but you saw that's more than minimum wage now. So that has increased even since its April 1st post. Pound of bananas, year 2000, 50 cents. 2026, 65 cents. So how are bananas able to travel 3,000 miles when a pound of ground beef only needs to move a few hundred miles? And the price difference is so just incredible. And don't tell me it's economies of scale, because these beef producers got economy of scale too. All uncooked beef prices bringing us up over 7. Alger Infinity putting it out. This is the newest price that I can find for you. It's creeping up around $7.07. Hey, lucky sevens. But don't worry, a good news, hopeful article here. JD Vance suggests U.S. could agree to unfreeze Iranian assets for purchase of U.S. soy, corn, and wheat. Bottom highlighted there. The money would actually go to help American corn, soy, and wheat benefit the Iranian people, man, they're going to benefit greatly from all the genetically modified crops. I am telling you, they're going to love that stuff. And would that be the unfrozen Bitcoin, or would that be the unfrozen Swift system money? Yeah, that's why people are trying to get over and get out of the dollar-based world we live in, because you just saw it happen twice. Russia and Iran. Fool me once, yeah, as the saying goes. Gonna blow the lid off the next story here. Beware. You're gonna get screwed at the pump. No pun intended. Well, yeah, every pun intended, I guess. This is a new one going around, so please be ultra aware, especially if you're traveling and you're not familiar with an area and you're just stopping in to get petrol somewhere because you're on the road and moving from one point to another. See that yellow arrow right there? Coming out from the city of North Lake Police Department. They're telling you check in the cradle to see if there's a screw there, because what the screw does is does not allow you to put the pump nozzle back in and then close the transaction, because that screw there won't allow that flat paddle to go back flat and stop your transaction and turn it off. If you used a credit card in there, then it'll keep the transaction open. And another part two of the whole scam is they'll tell you there's no way to get a receipt out of this, like the paper dispenser's empty or no receipts available. And a lot of people are just in a hurry, like, all right, let's go. We got the kids, whatever. Let's just get out of here, because you're so used to the pumps turning off. But in reality, it stays on. So then once they know that that has been paid for, they come in and they milk the pump. So if you see a screw on a pump, and then you see directly with that that the receipt dispenser is out of order, they're scamming your card to be able to pull more petrol out of it. And then another location happens the exact same thing, showing you that a different type of screw was pumped in, but the MO is exactly the same. They use something to stop the depression of that lever that then turns off your transaction and actually stops the gas pump itself in to be able to pump more and put more into a tank or gas cans or whatnot. So please be aware of this. You know, I'm trying to bring you the best I can because I drive too. You know, and if I were to see this, it's so small, and you notice if you're in a hurry and you're not really paying attention, you're not going to notice it. And another instance of getting screwed, not this time at the pump, but on the scale. Brand new package, Jimmy Dean bacon, marked weight on the package, 12 ounces. Put it on the scale, 10.6. We saw heaps of this happening in Walmart too. People were actually weighing the different types of hams, putting it on the scale, and it was far less than what was marked on the package. So we've come into an era that was very similar to the turn of the century from, say, 1900s to, say, 1915. Not the Federal Reserve formation, but the way that things got so scammy that in restaurants at the time, if people weren't and didn't eat like their salad, for example, they would take the leaf off of one plate and put it on another to save money. This is why a lot of regulation came in the 1915s. You know, it could be an urban myth or whatnot, but it seems like we're getting back to that same scamminess before the entire system got reworked and an enormous amount of new laws and legislation come in. Again, well, we don't have enough already, but you can see the level that this deceit is coming to. And our society is degraded so greatly into this type of deceit is literally on the tip of everybody's fingers to try to make money because, well, the inflation's running high, there's not enough money. And it just seems like it's okay to steal now. Like the messaging has been giving out. You can be lawless, it's okay. You can scam, steal, whatever, it's okay. Like that's what we've degraded to morally as a society. And you got the nefarious ones, which are more plentiful by the day. Low trust society. And again, when it comes to the corporations, I understand some scammer putting a screw in, low IQ, low trust kind of individual. But then when you come to corporations, that takes it to a whole nother level. And we're allowed this corporate greed and scamming to go on. You know, the entire thing of removing jobs, I get it. Automation, it's the same thing. Like they were worried about cars and horse drivers when automobiles came out back in the day as well. But the pure theft of scales not matching what the food is, you know, because the food's costing more, it's taking more of our actual literal time, because time is energy, energy is money, currency, the flow of current. So to charge that up, literally charge card. Why do they call it a charge card? Everything's revolved. See, the electricity, the aspect of energy going in to create this value exchange is being, well, siphoned at the moment. Somebody's filling a battery on the other side with your time. They're storing your energy in different ways and forms. As we talk about Bitcoin, just a store of energy. So that energy can flow around the planet much faster. But I digress here. We're really going to need to be buyer beware for everything. And that's the scariest part. When it becomes buyer beware, we become a third world nation at that point. Like, I've traveled a lot around the planet, not boasting or anything, but I've been around and I've seen some, nations where you go and it's buyer beware. You're on your own. Nothing's safe. I mean, you're constantly 100% attention, because not only the road conditions are just atrociously dangerous, everything doesn't work half the time. And then everything you buy is suspect anyway. And, there's a more than a handful of countries like that. But again, you're going to have to put on your A game of awareness moving through this point forward. You're going to have to weigh this stuff after you get it off the store shelves and go take it in and go weigh it on a scale in every store you go to see if the weights measure up correctly or not. Oh, and they'll say, oh, well, there was a problem with the one line. We're so sorry. We'll give you a coupon. You can go get another one, spend your time, spend your energy, and go get another one of our products. But nothing happens to them. If you get I would say, if you do that, you get a 100 to 1. So if you get a package that's misweighed, your coupon should not be a 1 to 1. Like, hey, we'll give you a free one. It should be 100 to 1. And speaking of Europe, on the left here, government deficits. And I want to compare that with the US. So if you look around and see who's spending more than they're bringing in from revenue, there's your heat map, for a better term. France, boom, pops out 5.4. That's why they have the most taxes in Europe. Well, England's no better, UK. But the United States on the right, far right chart I got for you here, 7.3% negative on the government deficit. Romania, yay, America's tied with Romania. I guess that's something to celebrate for the 250th anniversary. Oh, wait. Hey, surprise, US money printing up and up again. This is a never-ending thing we're looking at here. We're going into hyperinflation, slowly grinding. And everybody talking about how the M2 supply was tracking Bitcoin. Here's your BTC dropping like a rock. Money supply goes forward. Everybody's dumping it into the whole AI trade. When that spins off and reverses, everybody will dump back into crypto. And you can see the speed at which that's increasing. So you just know inflation's continuing along with that. That's literally the reason everything costs you so much more. And unless that reverses or slows down, the prices you're seeing now are going to continue to increase at the same speed, actually faster, because just the law of money, the more there is, the more inflation there is. And at some point you get into that jump literally overnight where things just go up in price, double or triple overnight. Starting you off right here as we get into the barbecue for the summer. Notice that these 4 companies own all of those brands, the meat packers. There's 4 companies that control almost everything you'll find in a supermarket. Tyson Foods taking the #1 spot for the most brands, Cargill, National Beef as well. Now, do you think with these 4 companies with this much power over cattle ranching, pork industry, and anything chicken, do you think there could be price fixing amongst these companies? Now, in my humble opinion, I think we have to push in more anti-competition laws, because with 4 giants like this, we should have 16 companies controlling the meat industry in America, not just this small handful. Monopoly is a good word to use here. We passed these monopoly laws. Remember when AT&T used to control the industry telecommunications wise, and then it got broken up, and then look at all the options we have today. Competition took the prices down. It was getting so ridiculous back in the 70s and whatnot, 80s, that people were complaining, this is outrageous that 1 company or 2 companies can control the entire telecommunications industry. Well, if they were complaining because 2 at that point Ooh, how about 4? Are we not to the same, 30,000 foot view here, that this much control in just one industry? And if you go through as well, you look at different types of processed foods that come into our supermarkets, they're all under this one giant umbrella of a company. And the prices that we're seeing today, everybody's talking about trying to fix prices. How are we going to do? What are we going to do with inflation? But a lot of it stems from there is no competition. How are you expected to get lower prices if there's no competition? That's the question. Everybody's looking at this from the wrong direction. Oh, we're going to penalize the cattle ranchers. They're charging too much for the head at the gate there. Well, not really. They're getting shaked over to coals and raked over a barrel too. And then the bigs here. What do you think their profit margins were for the year? I would encourage you to go take a look at like Finance, Yahoo Finance, something like this, finance.yahoo, get in there and look at what the profit margins were for these companies alone as the price of our meats skyrockets. And now I saw, the newest totals of $7 plus for a pound of hamburger. Come on now. I mean, something's gotten out of control here. If we're spending more than an hour's wage at, minimum wage in America for a pound of ground beef, then something's gone drastically wrong. And we need to take a microscopic view of this monopolistic practices in the meat industry, according to some, allegedly. And speaking of strangeness, off McLeod Finance, largest Chinese banks forcing customers to close gold and silver short positions. What do they know? Dug into it a little bit deeper, and it's not just that, it's long positions too. Like China's banks are not going to let people trade, like on the individual side. Not sure what's happening, but jumping over to central banks, buying 15 times more gold than they're reporting on paper. So again, there's this huge disconnect. So China's trying to take any individual investor out of the gold and silver trade. Even if, TD Ameritrade, something equivalent in China, you're out. Only the institutions are allowed in. And we're seeing the silver and gold prices go up and down drastically. So something is, blowing in the wind, or else they wouldn't have this type of announcement that all of your positions need to be closed. Now, depending on what the bank is, some are immediately by the end of today, some are like by the 5th of July, but nothing really stretches past into July on the 15th. So whatever is coming, put it on your calendar on the 15th past. It's possible something gold in the silver market, according to, China's moves right here. And speaking of that, this is the United States Mint website. And here we are, freedom ringing, Liberty Bell 1 ounce gold coin. $19,600. You realize the price of gold today is around $4,000. So I would ask you, where is the extra $16,000 approximately of value for minting a single coin? That's outrageous. That's not acceptable if it truly is. Or are they following with the same thing the Chinese are? And we're about to get a whole bunch of differentness in the metals market here. Just asking for a friend, because over here on silver, the same exact thing. What's silver at? Like 60? I'm going to round it up a little bit. They want to charge you $750. Where's that extra $690 coming in to mint one single piece of silver? Like, again, it's something, there's a massive disconnect here, massive disconnect. But to celebrate, if you are going to be celebrating out for the 4th of July in America for the Independence Day, balloon releases will be illegal across all of the United States beginning August 1st. So even outside, some states are pulling it in a little bit, sending notices out. Don't release balloons. So another, thing that you can put a feather in your cap and say, one more regulation to remember as we have fun. You kids with the birthday party, you're in trouble if those balloons get out. Now, since we're in the barbecue season all through the summer, happy summer to everybody out there across the planet. Get out, enjoy the outdoors, sunshine. So let's talk about cellulose for a moment here. And this is more of a public service announcement, I guess. So we're using it as a fiber supplement, thickening, emulsifying agent for different types of yogurts, calorie reducer like low calorie foods, and then an anti-caking agent so things don't stick together in the package. This is what it is right here, but a little more refined form than this. So I found this super interesting video. How much sawdust can you put into a Rice Krispie? But industry speak would be, how much allowable cellulose will there be in a Rice Krispie? Okay, you can dissect that into industry talk. So there's a website, Prevention. They also have a magazine for older adults. And it shows you, out of 80,000 grocery store products, the ones that are most heavily added into cellulose, whatever that is. So tomato sauce right at the top. You know, if we're going to be out and ketchups and this sort of thing as we get into the barbecue, and then salad dressings, obviously. Ice cream bars got to be the dessert, but you can look at all these things that really contain a lot of cellulose. So as you're buying, do be aware of the labels. Take a look at those. Support quality foods. Because even the veggie burgers right there, about 4 from the bottom. And if we go, the list continues. And again, it's Prevention Magazine. You can take a look at the full thing. And then it got corn tortillas. Obviously, everybody's going to be doing something with nachos through the summer here. Sour cream even, and I was surprised about that. Again, you have to look at some very quality sour creams, and everybody in the industries apparently seems to be using this cellulose. I understand it's a cost-saving move. There are allowable, they've done, like there's 10, if not 50,000 peer-reviewed research papers out on this, on allowable cellulose. Originally, they were using sugarcane. It's white, it's clear. When it goes into a liquid, it dissolves clear. So the different types of cellulose is, you know, graduated over the years to not just using sugarcane. They're using quite a bit different types of cellulose from different plants. And then the studies were all about how much you can ingest or eat before it starts to give you like indigestion and that sort of thing. So they have these allowable limits that are now with the US FDA, that sort of thing. So take a look, make sure you choose carefully and support companies who really do give us quality foods, because that's all about speak with your money. If they're not going to provide a quality product, don't spend your money on it. Always support businesses, families, farms, and companies that provide us with good quality foods, because that's really what the name of the game is going to be moving forward. Might cost you a tiny bit more, but it'll be worth it in the end. Now, speaking of things banned, besides the balloons, let's jump down to Cuba, Havana. 3 Canadian airlines suspending Cuba flights indefinitely. Like, we from the United States don't even have to worry about this because we just can't go. But directly from Canada, and I thought, which carriers are stopping? Air Canada itself, WestJet, and Air Transat. These are the ones that are going to end forever the flights down there. So again, this is pre-positioning something. They know change is about to happen and they're going to stay out of harm's way. So if you knew imminent change was coming, I would do the same thing. I'm not going to go. I'll just save the money, wait, and we'll restructure it after whatever happens. Sunwing as well in on this. So that actually makes 4, but that's sort of a vacation planning. It's all inclusive to get your flights, hotel, that sort of thing down there. Out of Quebec. So a little bit of explainer here. So the event, whatever is going to happen in Cuba, is supposed to happen between now and November 1st, because you can see these companies, second paragraph, stop flying there February of this year, 2026. And Air Canada and WestJet, Sunwing Vacations, Transat will begin flights again November 1st or in October. So what's that telling you? There's a window where something's happening. They've been broadcast, got the message, and they're waiting. And again, they're going to let whatever flows over, flow over. And speaking of which, Adapt 2030, taking tips. Thank you very much. Just an idea for the tip jar here, because I'm a fan of God's money, gold and silver, atoms in your hand, vibrating. Gotta love it. Do appreciate you watching. Hope you got something out of the video. Important times here. Just, you know, summer's always such a fun time. Please enjoy. Leave all the news behind. Go enjoy your life. But at the same time, make wise choices while you're doing it. And, you know, summertime, get that sunshine. It really makes you feel alive again. Enjoy family, friends, because that is what it's really about. Like this distractive thing that we're seeing all around, that everybody's glued to the tube and what's the next thing to drop? Drop that and go outside and have fun. Go tubing down a river, go for a hike. Something like this. I don't know. But anyway, summertime is the best time. Appreciate your time here. Speaking of time, thank you so much for spending your valuable time here. You're going to have to subscribe to the channel if you'd like the content. Click that notification bell. A lot of people aren't getting that notification any longer, but please click the bell once again. Share with your friends and family. Dice this thing up. Send it through your social media shorts if you like to. Amber, waves of grain. Not so much this year. Newsweek putting it out along with some other forecasters. America's wheat harvest set to fall to the lowest level in 150 years. Some say 140, 149, close enough for government work because it's a government statistic. U.S. wheat harvested planted 1866 to 2026. And you see there's a red line and then the black line starts. Well, the red line was estimated until they got what considered quote unquote really good data just prior to the Dust Bowl, because they started to notice crop losses then too, and they started measuring it to make sure there was enough food for the country. So that puts it in a category of its own, going back that far. What atrocious events had happened to our country in terms of not being able to provide enough rainfall for us to even grow food, and with the incredible drought. You know, El Niño's coming in, and that has something to do with it. But before that, you know, winter wheat never got a start this year either. And dropping in on the July 2nd drought index here, no putting low to 48, plus Puerto Rico and Alaska and Hawaii on this, but the drought persists over predominantly a huge amount of our grow belt out west and central. So when you put it in perspective, this is going to be a long-term event here. This is not subsiding. Then you want to add in what's happening in Europe as well. They're having the same exact thing in multiple months. And then that heat dome that just went over really finally sealed the fate of the crops. Corn mainly. They're looking at about a third of all the corn in Europe wiped out. Remember, to step back a month or so, they already had a drought and a heat dome over there when the plants were just emerging out of the ground, and they were really trying to get started, and they got bashed with the heat, not enough water. They sort of recovered, and then we got these record temperatures across France and Germany and other places, some Romanian damage up there too, but it seemed like the greater part of Europe where they're growing crops, corn specifically on this one, where in the United States it's wheat specifically. But wherever you're looking, Australia, wheat, massive declines. Everywhere we grow wheat, Canada, the wheat is down, the corn is down. Prices are going to go up. They're going to follow along this. And the thing I kept reading again was about, is it going to be a prolonged event? Because if it is, start looking for the prices to go up in different commodities. You can follow that on different agricultural news, or just, you know, jump into where they feature prices for wheat, corn, soy, cocoa, sugar, these types of things. This seems to be a prolonged event. So it does look like these prices are going to continue up and up. Now we'll get through the second batch of crop tours here in July. And if they come out as bad as their forecast, then you're going to watch the numbers rise further. Now, put it into context. Where we're spending right now with the wheat, it's not even close to the record highs that it's been. We're far below record highs. If you go on a all-time basis, we're not there yet. Europe's not there yet either. But if it persists through the rest of this summer and we get into these drought conditions, we will go at or above those record highs again. So just think about how different, however old you are, what you remember food prices being, depending on how expensive the wheat or the corn or the soy was. That's where we're going again. It's just history is going to repeat this time. It's going to rhyme. So get ready for that. If you remember those days of old. Speaking of days of old, 1911, July 4th. Look at the scorching temperatures. Nearly the entire United States was 90 or 100, blanketed. 1911, put that one in. That was just when things were starting to flip over, and then it rolled for another decade or so, and that Dust Bowl started to kick in, and then, ouch, it really slammed. So it took about a good 20 years after that event before Dust Bowl really got to being not beyond a nuisance. It was a civilization-changing thing, at least for us in America. But if you look at the statewide temperature highs over the years too, this map's really good. You can freeze frame it. It'll show you what the year was and what the high temperature was for that year. This is all-time record highest temperatures, because we've been a huge amount of heat. Heat domes need just tremendous amounts of power outages and things this year. You got to put it in perspective. Like it is a scorcher in some of these. Like look all up where the Midwest grow belt is 120 degrees, 1936, 118 degrees, 1934, 121 in 1936 as well, 120 in 1936. 36 seemed to be like a crazy hot year like 1911 was. So you go back in time, you can find something that rhymes again. Picture some scrappy looking corn for you here, breaking photos, dead corn, sunflower, and potatoes also across the EU. Just they're not coming back. So the losses are just going to continue to mount. They're calling it devastating. I don't know if that's the correct word to use. But beyond the spindly scraps of what was corn here, you can see how everything's just burned on the leaf. Like that is not going to mature. Any ears are they're going to be small or they're just not coming. They're in full preservation mode right now. For them to throw off grain heads is the last thing they're thinking about. These plants thinking about, I need to stay alive. You're not worried about producing something when you're at bare minimum operation. But here we go. This is the euro corn price here. So you can see it's already starting to go up, right along with the declarations of corn being lost in different crops. So this is like a real time going up in price thing that we're seeing here. And it's going to continue. And another thing I didn't notice, President Trump declined to renew NAFTA, the U.S., Mexico, Canada trade agreement. And so any of the grains coming across the borders, that's going to be subject to tax now, and that is going to cost more. If we need to import it for some reason, or if the things that we need to bring in as foodstuffs, it's just going to cost more. So a moment of zen as we continue the video here. Trying to keep it a little cool as well. It looks like a very cool landscape, you know what I mean? It just, you can tell that's a chilly spot. That's not Arizona. That's like 60 north and above, getting you nice and cooled off in the summer heat. Oh, wait, the red is back. Red, 23 trillion. That's the money supply. That is not the debt. Please do not mix those two up. Money supply hits a record in May of 2026. And I thought, oh, that's 23. You know, that's a significant number in these large money crowds, a surge of monies that didn't stop. It didn't stop, it's still going. Surging again. Largest increase in 5 years. Well, that was on top of already in May, and that was just dovetailing on, and it is just continuing to, well, move up. So what do you think happens with prices of your food when they're printing money too and them? The only way we're going to solve this is I've heard some talk of them revaluing gold to $20,000 an ounce. That's about it. Nobody really wants to buy the debt around the planet. So we're just going to keep printing. This alone is going to drive the price of food in America. And maybe not so much outside in the other places where they got their different own currency they can manipulate and do stuff with. But in the US, the more we print, the more, that's why things are getting so expensive. Just like you can watch it go up by the month. It's because we keep printing money by the month, just like you see in the charts. These charts, your food prices follow the charts. Your daily cost of living follows the charts. So where do the charts go from here? Oh, 166 trillion. That's with the T right there. Trillion, not billions, trillions. Just like 23 trillion for United States, 166 trillion on the global stock market. Like you just look at these unsustainable, and it just continues to grind up. And in my opinion, from what I keep reading and hearing, they're just not going to let it fall. They're going to keep printing more money. It looks good on paper, it really does. But that's inflation that you're seeing in the paper. That's not true value. That's not a pre-Federal Reserve dollar of value. You're getting inflated money in those prices. So it looks like everybody's going up. Yeah, but the amount you can buy with that. When I cannot talk about money without throwing in the stable coin supply, that is all part of the new money system. That's what I said. There's got to be an escape valve here somewhere, right? This is part of it. So the stablecoin, look at the stablecoin supply. That, just consider it money supply. It's like a new way to print money. Look at that, it's up and up and up. Everywhere you look, it's inflation. So I'm just trying to put these two together. Crops far less this year. Yields are down. You can just see it every continent. It's atrocious this year. Truly, it's atrocious. It's the best word to use. Less yields, and we got inflating currencies across the planet. That is not a good recipe. It's just not. It just points to food is going to become more and more and more expensive, and it's going to be this never-ending grind up. Like you've seen it since, say, 2020, when the vid started. Things just got more expensive, especially after 22, 23. Just think you could definitely see everything it got repriced across the planet to stay there permanently at that new step up. Well, we're permanently going to a new step, or we have already entered a new step up where prices will not fall back down from here. I remember the good old days of 2022 when things were only double price when I remember them from 2020. Now they're 3-4 times price. You know, so put that in perspective. It is going to keep going up. Now, how do you protect yourself against this? That's the whole thing. Like, the only reason I bring you this is like, it's a collective thought here. What can we do, knowing this is in play, to keep our families safe and then try to reduce some of these costs, produce our own foods? You know, how do you get around some of this thing? You buy in bulk, you share with others? I'm not sure. It's a discussion board. You can leave your comments below. I'd like to hear them too. What are people thinking? What are you doing? What are you implementing? How can we work together to solve a single problem, this one? That's really where the value is going to be, is solving this type of problem. It's going to be a pain point for everybody. So how do we get through this pain point? Offer solutions. Because I want to bring you to the wealth pyramid. Visualizing global wealth. And you look at the pyramid and you're like, oh, wow, look at all the money at the top there. It's around not really that 1%, is it? And you go, oh, wait. It's an interesting way to look at the amount of money. So that top more bright green section where it says 45.8, those are people with $1 million or more on the planet that hold all that wealth. And then as you step down that, 39.4% of the global population with assets of 100,000 US dollars to $1 million US dollars, they control that much of the money or the wealth on the planet. It's not just money, it's real estate, it's assets. And if you get down to that very base layer, which is very, you know, small at the bottom, 1.2%. But you look at that and you go, well, that's a large part of the pyramid. That's only 1.2%. They have $10,000 approximately of accumulated asset wealth. So look at that. That's kind of interesting. Then looking into that, I'd like to, you know, wide that last part out there because it doesn't do it justice here. Adults on the entire planet who have less than $10,000, and that could be in cash and assets, less than 10,000, half the planet. Now, where you live, you're always judging against everybody else, keeping up with the Joneses who have the same amount. But, you know, you go to half the other planet and you make in a month what they have an entire lifetime of earnings under their you know, fingertips here. 34.4% of the people across the planet own $10,000 to $100,000 worth of assets. If you're above that, and 100,000 to $1 million is only 12% of the whole planet's population. And look at that very little top there, 1.1% have over $1 million, but they control that large part of the entire global wealth pyramid. You know, it's just two different ways to look at it. Visually, the amount of control there is in that. Because trying to navigate through the stock market, make some money, put some things aside, get some real estate, it's like playing a game. The financial system against you. Now, how good are you? Can you outsmart the financial system? Oh, wait a second. They write their own rules, don't they? That's what we're battling against. And the rules are being ever rewritten as we come into this economic, well, restructuring, shall we say. But growing your own food or having access to food or providing food or raising animals, anything like this, any way you can. Maybe you don't even have to be that producer. If you're able to take what somebody else has produced and turn it into a more valuable product. Like maybe someone gives you a couple 100 pounds of apples. What can you do with that and turn a couple 100 pounds of apples of like maybe 60 bucks worth of apples into something else that's worth 150 bucks. All right, and then you can scale that once you can figure that process out. Or what can you do with 1,000 pounds of apples and turn it into something? You know, you just work the numbers on that. But all kind of produce coming up here at this time of the year through the rest of the summer. You can get it incredibly cheap, I mean, comparatively. So that excess, how can you take that product and turn it into, can a flour turn into a tea? Can you use part of a leaf and dry it into herbs for cooking, culinary? There's a lot of different things. Fruit dried, how about, what's that, fruit leather? So starting you off, these 6 states celebrating America's 250th anniversary by raising your gas tax. Go for it, California at the front of the list. You knew it, you knew it. Washington, Illinois, Maryland, Virginia, and Mississippi are scheduled to see higher state gas taxes. Wait a minute. I thought we were trying to do away with taxes for the emergency because of the whole oil thing in the Middle East. I guess these 6 states didn't get the message. And just a quick note for you, in Asia, the gas prices and the diesel prices are all falling. Yeah, this week they're supposed to lower prices by, a percentage, but the rest of, seems the Western world, the prices continue to increase. Doesn't make sense. It's so reliant on oil imports out here, and just even the announcement and maybe a tanker coming in, and then the prices drop immediately. But back in the States, we got the refineries, we got the oil production, and then prices keep increasing. There's a disconnect here, and I wonder how much it has to do with the taxes that we're all paying. And if it's such an emergency, should these taxes not have been withdrawn by now? And right along with lubricants and that sort of oil-based chemical, Nissan oil changes could get harder as dealers ration motor oil. This is from last month. So this is dealer specific. And they're going to be rationing 5W30 and 0W20 Nissan genuine motor oils. The dealers get first priority over it, but then they in turn get to decide who gets the oil change. And it's going to be the fleet vehicles from other companies that are running within that are getting service from Nissan. You as an individual are going to be left last in line as always. So corporations help corporations, which, well, that's that's what they're in business for, is to make more money. So businesses help businesses first. Keep that in mind. You as an individual are always going to be last in line for everything, unless you own a business. The story I covered last month as well, they can't make printed circuit boards anymore. This was going to drive the price of consumer electronics anyway, and woo, that did not take long now, did it? You knew this was coming, the price rise in all consumer electronics, and it's here. Apple to raise prices due to memory chip shortage, so they say. It's not a shortage and such, we're in a gray area here. And I love how, unfortunately, price increases are unavoidable. It's almost like when Johnny Depp and I forget who the girl was, flew to Australia with the 2 dogs and they didn't take them through quarantine and they got caught and they sent that public apology where they were just mocking them going, oh, we are so sorry. It's exactly the same thing. They're sitting on there on the news broadcast going, oh, we're so sorry. It is unavoidable. We have to do this. And it was just almost like they took the Johnny Depp script out of that thing. Unbelievable. We're seeing it in real time. We are in some sort of make-believe land here. We're doing our best to mitigate huge, or should I say huge, increases that are being passed to us. Yeah, from who? You're the primary producer of this. Come on, you're vertically integrated from top to bottom. Oh, you're going to raise prices on yourself? Okay. But again, consumer electronics, printed boards, memory, this whole thing, the list here is not inclusive, but it'll give you an idea of what is going to get short and what's going up in price. Consumer electronics at the top, smartphones, tablets, smartwatches, televisions, gaming consoles, cameras, computers, computing laptops, desktop motherboards, graphics cards, peripheral devices, microwaves, refrigerators, coffee makers, alarm clock, anything with a chip in it. Anything electronic, printed circuit board, higher price. Back to Apple to raise prices due to memory chip shortage. There's less supply at a time when consumers want devices. And the memory guys are passing along huge price increases. We definitely need a memory pricing and supply to return to reasonable levels for consumer products. That's the bottom line. No, it's not really. You have to dig deeper into the article. It makes them seem like they're the victim. Oh, we're getting price increase. We can't control it, even though we're Apple and we own all the factories that produce everything. But memory chip shortage. But let me read you the part in blue. Supply is being allocated to high bandwidth memory, which is used in AI servers. What? I thought you just said it was a shortage and everything was getting higher, and that's why you had to raise the prices for electronics for the consumer. The shortage is because they're rediverting it over to AI data centers. There's not a shortage, quote unquote. It is a reallocation that's creating a shortage in the original business model. So, you got to read these articles carefully moving forward. And you see, again, this is the second time you're in the back of the line as an individual. AI data centers are first, corporate to corporate. And it really surprises me, the way that Apple had, set up their entire, I don't care what part is in an iPhone, they manufacture it from top to bottom. There's nothing in that phone that's not coming from Apple itself out of factories across our planet. So when they say there's a shortage on chips, it's just being rediverted over to AI data centers. So don't believe it. Don't believe it when they tell you they have to, oh, we're so sorry, we have to raise it. It's undeniable. It's inevitable. We have to raise the prices. We're so sorry. Speaking of AI data centers, I'm starting to regret showing my dad how to generate AI images. He sent me this one here. It said, Amon Alisa. And I was like, thanks, Dad. Saturday, mowing the lawn. Great. A mown lawn. Here it goes. Yeah, right, Dad. Thanks. And speaking of AI data centers, I was watching this AI short award-winning film called 2095. And it took you through these different steps of where our world is now until 2095. Boom, right there, 2047. Global food rationing begins after automated harvest failures, meaning they've gone AI and taken that clear out into the crops. Everything's droned, everything's GPSed, everything's running autonomously, no humans involved in the farming process, and whoosh, collapse. That's what they're talking about. Let's bring you up to some food prices here. It's what it's all about. Grocery prices over the last 12 months, bread up 33%, potatoes 50%, higher in some areas actually because the Washington potato harvest had some difficulties. Tomatoes over 100, you're looking at double there. Bell peppers double at 100. Fruits and veg overall 70%. I thought inflation was only 2 point whatever. At 70%, I think the inflation figures are wrong. Coffee, 75, is slowly going to trickle down. They had a decent harvest, so look for the drop in price over the next 6 months. Beef doubling. No, wait, is that a tripling? Is that a 200% up? Yes, it is. And dried beans. Which brings me to your bowl of rice is hurting the climate too. Rice cultivation could be as bad for global warming as 1,200 coal-burning power plants. So why aren't consumers more bothered? Because they need to eat. And this has been farmed for 8,000 years. That's why nobody's bothered. I'm really kind of shocked that they're now putting your food production in the same basket as a coal-burning power plant. It's shocking. What's the reframing that's going on here? Am I supposed to eat less or not eat rice at all? What should I switch to? Okay, all the Asian nations that have been brought up on rice. We're brought up on bread, on wheat, these kind of, no, you can't have any more bread or wheat. You need to start eating rice. Like that's just insane to even think that you could switch some. Okay, everybody in America, you have to start eating amaranth now. There's no more wheat even. You got to eat amaranth. You would shake your head and go, that's impossible. I don't even know what it is. I don't know how to cook. I don't know anything about it. That's the same thing. Oh, you can't eat any more rice. You need to switch over to sorghum. Oh, wait, that's bad for the environment. It uses too much fertilizer. So does corn. What are we going to eat? Air? Are we going to become breatharians? Oh, I'm full today. So I'm saying they're trying to demonize this. This is as pure as it gets. Barely any mechanized machinery in there except on the planting and on the harvesting. Everything else is pretty much by hand. And they're demonizing this. But this is okay? Come on, really? You got to be kidding me. This inverted world we're in makes no sense here. Oil refineries, great. Oil loading terminals in the Gulf, amazingamente. But growing rice, bad. And again, you add ridiculousness on top of ridiculousness. And I'll take you for your lovely beach journey here over to Mumbai in India. Beach day for everybody. Looks awesome. I love it. And let's bring you. We got to clean ourselves off after that. Okay, over to Petra in Jordan. Rare desert floods bringing in the wadis, flash flood, and they had to get people out of there. You can see the wadis, or those canyons, or the small canyons. They're called wadis, are filling up. Danger, Will Robinson. And with all this going on, please remember to live while you're busy surviving and busy navigating through the news. Now, just for an FYI, this Strait of Hormuz seems to be, and I'm going to say seems to be ended, but it's been like 60 times they've said it's finished. Even though it does, and they sign all these memorandums and things, and the Gulf opens up. From every single estimate I've got, I can't find lower than 7 months until things start to smooth out again. Average is 9 months, and on the outliers, like 1.3 years or a little more. You're going 15, 18 months until things get smooth again. So just because it opens, like everything I'm discussing here is going to continue to go for the next 6 to 9 months of things costing more, things not available. They're going to be rationing this out, rationing that. And we're going to come into the harvest season, which truly had some damage done to it. Wasn't enough fertilizers, wasn't enough chemicals for the whole process, not enough diesel fuels here. There was already rationing in what people could get to plant out for the season. And we got this incredible heat wave, which I'll cover next video, rolling through Europe, which is absolutely going to just wipe out whatever's in the fields there. Again, they were already behind the 9-ball, 8-ball, 7-ball, 6-ball, 5-ball, whatever, because they couldn't even get enough fertilizer in the EU. So some significant things are still inbound, but you just see it piece by piece. It's like a death by 1,000 paper cuts here. You know, it's just never ending, and you need to ask yourself why. So I'm saying, just remember to live through this time. Turn off the devices, walk away for a while. When you come back, it'll be pretty much the exact same thing. Just get outside, enjoy nature. You're here for the heat, so I'll make it quick. Anomalies, Celsius, right over France, Portugal, Spain, showing you the hot spot there. Something like 13, 14 Celsius, which is about 23 degrees Fahrenheit over the normal. France, massive crop growing region. And as we stretch up into Germany, they're not immune either. Crops lost in both. It's not drought, it's instant heat stress. Those plants, they're probably not coming back. But before we continue on the heat, jumping over to the US, this is on the 21st of June. Cooler all through the Midwest grow belt, good for our agriculture. What's not good is the massive amount of rain set to drop until July 4th. This should run through the 20th of June all the way to July 4th, 5th, and you can see how much precipitation coming down. Inches wise, our version of the super intense colors is going to be that brown, also bringing you to 8 to 10 inches of rain, desperately needed over some of our crop growing areas. Prices starting to move back up again. And as we get to the final totals on the run through July 6th, again, it seems like it pegs out just around a foot of rain anywhere in the red, which is an enormous amount of the country, over 50%, going to see at least 2 to 3 inches, much needed again. Now, here's something that's you don't see every day. Top is where the corn for November delivery. Your next is on the bottom, that blue line, that is American corn for September 26th, Chicago Board of Trade delivery. Look at the divergence in the delivery by continent. They are anticipating such a damaging event in crop production for corn. It's just rare that you see this kind of split, or they call it a divergence between prices. And we found the same thing with gold and silver pricing independently in Asia compared to what's in London. Now we're starting to see this rift in our world where everything's going to be priced by continent, because there's such an incredible mix-up in our normal patterns of the way we plant, harvest, the availability of fertilizers, the availability for us to procure any chemicals or herbicides, pesticides, fungicides. So each individual continent is now going to have its own production, way different than what the last, say 50 years had given us in terms of averages. You take away 30% of your fertilizer in a single year, or 40% or 50%, and those numbers are no longer valid. So you're looking at it here that you're seeing Europe priced in something different than the American price. And we can start to expect this across all food commodities, all food crops across the world. So start to take a look for this. Once you see it happening more and more, then you know this is the new direction that all these commodities, all of our food is going to take. And it might be much more expensive for you to live in some continents than others, And do you have a plan in case that happens and you get priced out of your daily meals? Where do you go from then? Back over to other anomalies that are going to affect crop production across both continents, North America and Europe. Cold blob. Cold means wet, and the AMOC is weakening. How will this affect crop production too? Because everything that bends or breaks even for a small amount of time, with all the chemical and fertilizer disruptions along with this type of disruption, we are in something unusual for crops. Then we move from the cold, wet spot into drier than a bucket of sand. Severe Weather EU putting this one out here. Forecast calls for below normal rainfall. US and Europe both. As you can already see, plants need water. That's why it's so valuable that we get this rain in the coming 2 weeks. Far below normal. So anywhere you see those reds and those browns on both of these maps, tremendously less than is what the normal for the year. I keep picking back on this chart here. We're coming into a very, very intense El Nino. This drives crop prices as well. That's part of the reason that it's going to get drier in Europe. So if we look at the driest possible, October, November, December, January. So it looks like in our winter time here in the Northern Hemisphere, lucky, the crops have already been harvested late October into November, but that maturation period coming from, let's say, July, August, September is definitely going to be affected by this event. They call it a super El Nino. And again, Severe Weather EU throwing this chart up here, 2 meter temperature anomaly, where it gets into the yellow and the oranges, warmer. Warmer means drier. And luckily there is some balance in that. We're going to get a little cool down in, looks like Spain, Portugal, Northern Africa. But if you look way up toward Russia up there in the far right of the chart, then it matches pretty much with what we're seeing right now. June 21st, the scalding heat over France, which everybody's talking about. We got some Spanish heat, but then back in the Scandinavian countries into Russia, they're getting cool crop growing conditions, perfect for the plants. So see, some areas are going to have better production than others, and this is why we're going to see this disconnected pricing. Throwing you with the temperatures here, way down into Mecca, 40 Celsius. You're pushing over 100 Fahrenheit on these. Madrid, right near 100. Paris, just a little over 100 Fahrenheit. We're still in June. Should be August temperatures. These are about 2 months early for you here. That's why it's all the to-do. They'll get these temps, but later in the year, August-ish. But if we look at the amount of red across France and Spain, Perpignan, 37.4 in Bordeaux and Cognac. I wonder how the grapes are going to do. I don't think they're going to do too well being cooked by this heat. I think the vineyards through the areas are going to be a loss. And you can look at those first 5, 37, 36, 36, and then it drops into the 35s, which, you know, that's like a very hot summer Tennessee day in the middle of the dog days of summer, as they would say. Looking at 110 Fahrenheit for some of the max temperatures that were recorded at the same time. So a small divergence from the Celsius to the Fahrenheit temperatures, but you get the general idea. Mateo, France, putting that one out for us. And then we're looking at max temperatures. See, America is the only one that doesn't use Celsius for the temperatures. So to try to come back and forth from all this, got to be 101, could be 97. We need to get onto the Celsius system too. But some of the max temperatures are pushing 40 plus. I see a 44 reading. I don't know if it got that high, because I didn't see any of those record temperatures set at 44 Celsius yet. The highest I saw was like 41-ish. But again, if we want to compare an apple to an apple, we need to go back to 1976. There's your temperature map above. Max temps. Madrid 36, 1976, Madrid 36, 2026 below. A little bit easier to see the colors, I guess, in the bottom map. And if we jump into Portugal, it did reach 40 degrees Celsius, 40.3, 40.1 in Alvega. But you can see Portugal pretty toasty along there. Good time to get into the waters along the Atlantic. Yeah, but there's lots of things that happen to gardens and also fields of crops when we get this type of heat this early. Now plants, they can sort of gradually get into the heat like we can. By the end of the summer, you're pretty used to it. But if you've ever taken a holiday and it's really cold and snowy where you are, and you fly to a tropical destination, as soon as you get off that airplane and it's 30 or 40 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than where you left. Ooh, you feel it. You really feel it. Take just a little hot for the day, you know. But as we start now, June, by the time August rolls around, if you've been out and you're doing some lawn work and, you know, just being outside more, you get gradually used to it. So what would have been super hot, that would have affected you greatly, like now, be the plant. Do you think that once they get damaged, that they're going to really recover through the season as it gets hotter after they've been damaged? They're expecting another heat wave next week. So we start to take a look at it now. They were stressed already because these plants didn't have enough fertilizer. They were growing at like suboptimal application. Many of you would say, great, use the organics. Okay, that's to a limited extent, but normally there's chemical fertilizers on that. They got the sulfuric acid shortages, like NPK shortages everywhere. So these plants are not as healthy. It's like you going on an extreme diet. You might get sick because you don't have enough food. Plants are the same way. They're a living organism that needs energy to protect itself. So we'll see what happens. This is the first time that we've lost 30, say 40% of the fertilizer at the same time across the Northern Hemisphere in planting season. It never happened before. And at the same time, we're seeing all these incredible out-of-season anomalies happening, and the hail size, the winds, and then it all seems to be building up through in the start of this, what they call Super El Nino. So we'll see. Again, it's all about the prices of the food. How much is it going to cost you and me more to eat? And how do we protect ourselves against that? Hey, you know, having a garden, you would have had to put some sort of cover on and keep this really wet and spend time with your gardens at, you know, 100 plus degrees Fahrenheit. You need to take care of your gardens way more than if it's in the 70s and they're getting pleasant sunlight. Damage everywhere. Speaking of France, the palace guards, are they going to become robots in pretty garments? That is the question. Halls of gold. France has seen a few famines during its centuries as a nation. I'm wondering what they're thinking right now if they were to look back through the archives. And because we're in Europe, I'm going to throw it at you, UK, although you had your Brexit. Here we go. Sainsbury going to ditch brown eggs, stock only white eggs. Net zero. And we're coming into a time when we can't even feed ourselves and y'all worried about the color of your eggs. I guess the priorities are going to have to change as we move into this, well, time. But please remember, you're going to need to know your farmers. It's the best direct route. Go get your food where they produce the food. You're going to have to know this segment of your community and then offer to help if you can. Because the more you help, they'll be happy to give you back some in terms of food for your labor. Always been like that. Starting off here with the population map of the planet, you need to ask yourself, and many have been, why are all these billionaires moving down to the southern hemisphere? Well, only 13% of the world's population resides there, meaning you can leave the other 87% behind, and all of that land is free for the taking, just saying. And you know how it is when one policy starts as a test bed, a hot test in one location, whether it be Canada or Australia or Europe, it is then going to sweep around the world. Have we seen the same thing with websites? Now you need to click that little box and consent to the cookies. That all started in Europe. Now it's a global thing. We're seeing it everywhere. Age identification started in Canada. Now it's going everywhere. So here's what's next on the map for you to look out. Europe taxes money you haven't even made or cashed out on yet. So the Netherlands is the very first one. Again, they always test these out in smaller nations first to see if they can roll it out somewhere larger. Netherlands plans to tax up to 36% gains on things you've only seen on the screen. So if you bought a house for $100,000 and it goes up to $200,000, you didn't sell the house, you just have it, it went up in value. You're going to owe 36% on that $100,000 that you made. So here's your $36,000 tax bill. And also, trading anything, apparently beyond crypto and stocks or whatever you would trade, they want a 0.1% or 0.1% tax on every crypto trade, as you sell it and as you buy it. So your minimum 0.2% in and out. That's exactly what the exchanges will charge you. So get ready for higher bills on that. And how do you think you would live your life if you have to pay taxes on things you haven't even sold that just go up in value because you're at the right place at the right time? If you get a $36,000 tax bill because your land and property went up $100,000 in, say, since COVID time, what would you do with that? Well, you would probably sell, but then you get a capital gains tax on the same that you would sell. So it's almost beneficial if you just sell it because the capital gain is going to be the same. You don't know next year if your property is going to go up or down in value. You don't know if that asset's going to go up and down in value. All you know is you're getting a tax bill for it, and how are you going to pay? If you land a $36,000 bill in my box, in my email box, or in my post box, I'm going to shake my head and go, I don't know how I'm going to pay this except sell something. And again, you're going to be happy. You're going to own nothing. Speaking of taxes, you know, in America, we got a heap ton of taxes. That's a polite way to say it. But look at France, 348 different types of taxes. 3 times what Denmark has, but Denmark's the one that's going to be starting the new capital gains tax. And if you go all the way to the bottom of the list there, that's Estonia. I'm wondering why people are moving over there. Lithuania, Estonia. Yeah, because they have less taxes and cost of living is lower too. You're just right next to the Russian front though. So what do you think American taxes are going to move to try to pay for this war? Already some tallies are in. It's at least 80 billion plus what we're seeing with the fuels. And this is going to continue to go up. Everything agriculture-wise, food price-wise. So as we move forward, then what do you think taxes will be? Where do you think they're going to raise the taxes to pay for everything we just spent in the last, say, 4 months on this debacle that we are trying to extricate ourselves from? Xville's going to have a tax with it. And speaking of Russia, the EU is going to ban purchases and consumption of Russian fish. That'll teach them a lesson, including cod. Poor little cod caught in the middle. Finally, we're addressing one of the last major sectors that hasn't been hit by sanctions so far, fisheries. So I wonder if the Americans can pull that in and get cheap fish because the fish feed went up so high in price that farm-raised fish is now far more expensive than it was because ocean fleets couldn't get out because of the diesel. Do you think we will get happy fish from Russia? We shall see. But hey, let's talk about birds. Birds, fish. Let's keep it natural. Wildlife. The apocalyptic bird nest. Now, apparently a Russian glide bomb knocked down a tree in the Donbass, and from the tree shattered branches rolls out a tiny bird nest made of drone fiber optic cables. Now, I had seen an entire field covered with these cables before. It almost looked like spider webs moving around in the wind, but it was an entire field full of the cables from those autonomous drones and different weapon systems that came out fly-by-wire. Nature is beautiful, and I think we've mimicked that to an extent, and now it is, well, part of the new landscape. I wonder how farm machinery are going to grind through all the fiber optics to plant that, and how healthy the soil will be with plastics and optic cables churned into it. And as I was saying, the pricing of energy is currently, well, changing. If you haven't seen it from the Strait of Hormuz, what's going to cost for natural gas, what the price of oil is going to be, it's all being repriced, and then who controls it is going to be a restructuring in itself. So let's start off here with the solar overtaking coal in U.S. electrical generation for the first time ever in May 2026. Follow that black line down, coal, green line up, solar. There's that convergence point there. But they never talk about the e-waste. Coal, okay, you got the fly ash, it needs to go somewhere. Where does the solar panel and all this crystalline structure go to when it's used its purpose of life? Unknown, probably in a landfill somewhere. Because the prices of coal in Asia, yikes, going up. Indonesia nationalized all their coal, plus the disruptions from the Strait of Hormuz. People are pushing back to coal. They're turning back on the coal burning power plants. Unfortunately, Australia has demolished all of theirs, I think except one. But out here in Asia, they kept them all. They just kind of mothballed them. Now they're all going back online again so to run through. And there's a lot of processes that are disrupted because of no plastics, no oil, no naphtha, chemicals, lubricants. So they're going back to coal. And I guess that's the way it's going to be for a while. So Asian coal price is highest. And Indonesia also, nationalizing its assets. That's the first again. We're going to watch all countries in the world nationalize everything. So China overshadows the world with solar panels. Added more solar to the grid in 2025 than any other nation. Now I'm looking at the United States, sort of at the 9 o'clock position there. That's us coming this year with the most solar ever. But look at China, 336 terawatts. Like we just rolled over a significant milestone at 86 terawatts. But that came in at 336 terawatts. China running her way with it. Those who have the energy control the future of the world. So let's look at the new growth rates of energy sources. And you notice this is on the left, it's a global energy supply. And where is the main driver of this? Expansion coming from US shale gas. Now, if that were to stop, they're going to have a substitute somewhere else. Looks like they're already trying to price that in and get it in motion. But in that center there, you got Indonesian coal, which you see is already going on a tear. Saudi Arabian oil, that's going to be restructured. And then I bet nuclear is going to be the thing moving forward because we got the data centers, we got the people, and now we got all the electric cars, percent of new car sales that are electric. You're putting all those automobiles on the road, they need electric, data centers need electric, you need electric, factories need electric, and there ain't enough electric. That's all I'm going to say about that. Where's it going to come from? Oh, Sam Altman, thank you so much. And Naomi Klein dueling it out here. I want to give you both perspectives because it is important. Sam Altman says we're introducing advanced, responsibly deployed artificial intelligence to completely liberate humanity from menial labor, unleashing an era of unparalleled human creativity and abundance. That's why we need all the extra power. Just give it to us. It's for creativity and abundance. I want to make a Mona Lisa pushing a lawnmower. A Mona Lisa, that's what I want to use the AI for. Cool. Naomi Klein says you are running a massive high-tech plagiarism cartel. You aggressively steal the collective intellectual work of humanity without consent, strictly to fire the working class and funnel the stolen wealth directly to your Silicon Valley masters. Ouch. And you can see exactly what they're talking about on both sides. Regardless of how it looks, it's going to require more energy. So where's all this extra energy going to come from? And how much is your life going to increase in spending, and is it going to cost you more? But how much? For everything that you consume, because you can see right now the chessboard has actually just been not flipped over, but greatly moved in the last 5 months. Where we get our oil, how we get our oil, who controls the oil, how much the oil is going to cost. How about all the naphtha, the sulfuric acid, anything fertilizers, that's all going to cost more. It's all going to be controlled differently. GCC countries, Gulf Cooperation countries, they're going to control a lion's share of things coming out of that area now. They can charge more if they want. We had a lot of destroyed different infrastructure, factories, plants, this sort of thing. That's going to come online later, years from now. Going to cost more until that gets built out. Electricity is going to cost more. I just showed you those examples. We got now the solar, the addition of solar, but I don't think it's going to be enough to push and give us what we need with all the data center build out. I just saw down, I think it was Chevron in Texas is using gas from the Permian Basin to generate electricity specifically for on-demand data centers. No residential at all. They burn it, they generate it from the gas, and they send it, all those megawatts, gigawatts, terawatts directly to the data centers. This is where we're getting into, where oil companies are building now gas-fired power plants just dedicated for these data centers. So where does it move from here? That's the question. Everything is going to go up in price. And now the money's being tweaked. They want you to pay taxes on things you haven't even sold yet. So you can just see the entire world's being restructured just like it was after World War II. I highly encourage you to look at World War II post, like 1946 to 49, and see the tremendous, unbelievable amount of the way the world was twisted and bent into a new form prior to what it was. And again, you'll start to see that if you go back into the aristocracy, further back in the 1700s, 1600s, the bend itself from the Roman Empire. So we're just in this like continuous twisting And we are definitely in another chapter of it right now. I do appreciate you watching. Hope you got something out of it. These are very deep questions. You know, in this agriculture thing, the disruption, yield declines coming up with everything else on top is at our doorstep here when the crop tours start here. Coming up in July, we're going to get smacked with a wet fish, the cod that's been forbidden for sale in Russia. Bam, bam. Going to hit us across the face with how much the wheat is going to cost you by the end of the year. Starting off here, Tambora, Sumbawa Island in Indonesia, 1815 erupts. Year without a summer, crops lost across, well, the entire planet for multiple years. Famine ensues. Not rumbling there yet, but Kamchatka. This took us up around 70,000 feet, and you can see once it starts to hit the mesospheric levels up there where it starts to flatten out. Hunga Tonga punched through that and went a little bit higher, but so far this seems to be peaking out around 70,000 feet. Add more ash into the atmosphere. Different view, same phenomenon, wider view from the highway here. You can see at the very top boundary layer there, that's pushing up through an actual different layer of the atmosphere upward. Very visually distinct here on what's happening. Now how this ash going to circulate around the world. Kilauea giving us another display. I think it's the 49th since the eruptive activity began. That's just going to continue in earnest. As the pressurization from the crust, oh wait, tectonic activity accompanying all of this. You need to ask, what's happening with the magnetic field of the planet? This occurring just in a matter of days with that 7.2, 7.5, and you know, that's disputed on what the actual magnitude was. You got the Philippines, which had the previous 7.6 just a week earlier, and Japan almost a 7.0, and it's just rocking everywhere across these plate boundaries. So just to catch you up on what's happening in Venezuela, the amount of buildings that had fallen down is staggering beyond belief. I mean, these just literally pancake down, building after building after building. You have to wonder which contracts were given by which leaders before of their family members that didn't build these to code. Before and after for you here, yellow building is kind of your target, what you're looking at. And to the right and the left of that, if you notice, those buildings are gone, they've fallen down. And a bit closer in with better resolution, and you can see that the yellow building itself is collapsing, but everything else around it is also. So who was involved with all these coastal development projects should be the question. And as you just head down the coast, look at the bottom floors of all these buildings almost sandwiched down and collapsing. Not quite, but the bottom floors are unlivable, so these entire buildings are going to have to be demolished. The ones that already fell down, I feel sorry for those people inside. They lost their homes, but if they're inside, you know, passed on to the next world. But this is just incredible amount of devastation here. Got a before and after of the helicopters finally getting over there. So this is what it looked like pre-earthquake and post-earthquake. I would say, you know, well over half the buildings have collapsed in this photo. And the other ones as well, you can see the structural damage on that. Those are going to be uninhabitable. So everything in this picture pretty much needs to be demolished and then rebuilt. I mean, that's a massive project. But on the ground, looking back at some of these same images here, you can see where the top floors collapsed in on themselves, and that's what the remnants are of a half collapsed building that didn't fall all the way over. And it's just hundreds and hundreds of these shots of these buildings, mid to high rise size, that did collapse in on themselves. I'm talking hundreds of these buildings. Then if we get into the residential 2-3 floors, even this, which you thought would almost be impervious to that type of damage on a quake, just falling over, toppling over. This is substandard building. And again, it would bring you back to the question of who got these contracts to build this. Now, another scary thing I want to bring you up to, notice the sofa on the edge of the wall there that collapsed and caved away. Can you imagine being on that sofa and that entire wall fall away and you're multiple floors up on this entire building that's shaking and moving? How about the rooms here? The entire wall fell away and there's somebody's closet. I mean, these buildings are just, they're completely gone. This is an example of almost every high-rise that's across the entire region at the moment. This is hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of reconstruction that needs to be done. Let me bring back to this quake map real quick. Notice where the plate boundaries are, and that highlighted orange along the coastal areas, that's where the plates are moving against each other. So I would ask the next question, okay, this pressure release was massive. So that pressure released area A, but where's the pressure now building in a new area that is now that pinch point that has gained an enormous amount of pressure on the plates that is going to release next into these 7.0 quakes? Somewhere of that large of a release pinched on another zone here. Is it the New Madrid fault zone? Almost directly north of where this is. And if we look at some of these longer duration quakes, you go back to San Francisco, it's in 1903. Go back to the New Madrid fault zone earthquake, that's 1812. You go back over to South Carolina, 1781, something like this. Some of these faults haven't gone off because maybe the pressure was released and it's on a 200-year cycle. And that eventually that Rubik's Cube of loosening, tightening, loosening, pinching comes back to a specific area again that's not widely in what you would consider one of those, it's not as well known as the San Andreas fault. One set of 8.0, 8.8, 8.0, 7.9 earthquakes, almost 200 years ago. So where does that leave us now? And really, we should be taking a greater look at this, because if the earthquakes come to the New Madrid fault zone again, and we lose the bridges and rail lines across the Mississippi, along with the pipelines that deliver our natural gas and fuels from Cushing, there's no way the East Coast of the United States is going to survive that. The economic meltdown would be nearly instantaneous. Like, these are real issues to take a look at. If there's another gigantic earthquake, say in San Francisco or Los Angeles, those are some of our major ports are coming in. Like, do we have backups to these, or is anybody discussing this type of, mass devastation that is pushing pressure somewhere else now? We're in a totally different world of population zones where these previous quakes 100 or 200 years ago, if they come back today, or if this causes a buildup of pressure and the Cascadian network of volcanoes starts to go off in those population centers, the insurance industries won't survive that. And then what do? The economy is fragile anyway. So just put it out there for food for thought. And then even more rare is that same Philippines earthquake that uplifted the entire coral reef from 6 to 12 feet. Now it's totally bone dry. You got the picture of the eel right in the front there. So everywhere we look across the planet, there's very, very unusual things happening. And back to the atmosphere again. And the main takeaway from here is Indian subcontinent affected by this lack of rain, which is going to absolutely cut their food production. We got the heat dome over Europe. We got the drought in America. So they're saying the Arabian Sea has gone silent with the absence of the Somalian jet, which actually is the provider of that moisture that then fuels in and drives the Indian monsoon, i.e. rice production, crop production. Way late on they can usually time this thing down pretty well. So if you're looking at the onset here, we are in summer, so you're looking at that red arrows, how it moves all that moisture up into like Orissa and Kerala, off to the west there, and then it bunches up around the Himalaya and it locks in and it just rains out all over the different crops that are being grown up in there. Monsoon rains 43% below average, which means massive famines coming into India. And this type of devastating drought, I mean, look what's happening in America. Knocked our wheat crop down some 30% with the drought. They're on a 43% moisture reduction. Can you imagine the reduction in rice? What's going to happen with their food prices and availability? They've already gone to the point of stopping the export of sugar because they were having so much difficulty, growing it, and then the prices were running away to the point of civil unrest. And I'd done that report right after the Strait of Hormuz got closed, that India had run out of polypropylene woven grain sacks, and they had no way to pack the rice to get it to market. And one of their huge disruptions, they had the rice sitting there, but they couldn't get it to market because they didn't have the proper packing for the bags to get it there. And then they had to retool some of their delivery systems to take trucks to go out with scales and armed guards and cash people and literally rock up into a town and have people wait in line. But before, you just went into a supermarket and bought it. But they didn't have the bags to pack it into the correct weights and put it in the supermarket. And that created its own set of just difficulties when the rice was there. Now they're lean on rice, they're lean on the sugar, stop the exports of that, and now they're coming into a mega drought. Oh, this is huge, huge news right there. And for what not to do in India, when a landslide comes down, yeah, you shouldn't be that close anyway, but just to hide behind a motorcycle and you think that's going to protect you, get a little more caution when the landslides come down. And here's what we're looking at across the Midwest grow belt. These massive electrical fronts are coming in now with these shelf clouds. I mean, mesmerizing, that is in itself. But what you see in front of you is what you should be looking at from a distance, what's above that. These electrical sprites, the red jets, either term can be swapped, but this was a thing of lore once before. And I do believe the ancients had seen this because they scrolled it and etched it on canyon walls in different forms. When this becomes much more energized, it takes on different shapes. Now this is becoming almost human-like. Rods from God, we see this through the Greek mythos, and the Romans, and back to the Phoenicians and the Assyrians. Everybody has their gods carrying these perceived lightning bolts. That is what you're looking at. India as well. So something through our past, this must come in a cycle of higher electrical activity where these things really hold state and they're like, wow, this is in the skies all the time. And legends had formed around these things themselves. And for my following of this, when I first started working on the channel by 2014 or so, they were very much smaller than they are today. For me, just as an observer of this, these are becoming more intense, longer lasting in the atmosphere, and much larger in the amount of them. Before 5, 6, but not 20, 30 in a row, holding state, turning into bulbous figures. Before they would be just sticks, basically, with a little bit of discharge tendril on the bottom. Nothing like that. That is literally orders of magnitude above what it was like 10, 15 years ago. If it continues like this, another 15 years from now, you're going to see these mythical figures on canyon walls just walk straight off and be in front of you and above these thunderheads as they roll through. Something's definitely changed on our planet. There's something significantly different. Everybody's feeling it. You can feel like there's just like a skittishness in the air. I think it all has something to do, and this is one giant set of change that we're rolling into, including the economy, where you're going to procure your food, where are you going to buy your food, how are you going to find your food. All this is changing. And then, lo and behold, the crop loss is coming out already. The damage is just biblical with the heat at this early maturation point of the crops. After emergence, coming into the first onset of growth that's going to push into the grain heads, and this heat is withering the plants, and some of them aren't coming back. This heat dome, the longer it stays around, the more damage those plants become. They're not ready for this heat yet. Give them another month or two, and they would be, but this early stage right now, they need that water and they're not getting it. And we can say the same thing with the United States and our grow belt. I mean, the wheat crop's pretty much a write-off. You're going to watch wheat prices start to head up as we get into the crop tours. Coming up, July is going to be the first major crop tours where all the universities and all the institutions go around and do the forecast. Now, corn could be, it's going to be a juggling match to see if it's good or bad, but just wheat across the board, negative. Winter wheat crop didn't come in that well either, so now we're just moving into like what you consider more summer types of produce, and wheat coming out. The sorghum's not doing too well, although it was really low planting in sorghum anyway over the years. I think they were at a 100-year low last year and the year before. Significant reductions in yield, and now Indian monsoon doesn't show up. And this is almost impossible, the set of circumstances that we're looking at here in terms of how much it's going to affect crop production. And now it's starting to get into our population centers here, these natural events, the volcanoes, the earthquakes, the hail events, the heavy winds, dust storms, all these sort of things that are blowing all over the place. I would encourage you to look back in the past and try to figure out what is happening currently and how you can protect yourself best. So is the SpaceX IPO tagged into all this extra money and liquidity and everything that's going to pull the whole market up? Because as this thing goes up, everything's going to rise with it for months, it looks like. So is this the starting point of a new thing where huge amount of endless money printing will come in because we got all these people out of work that are going to need stimulus checks and basic income again? And it just seems like we're right at that COVID era where people are understanding that we don't have enough money around the place to provide for everybody's needs. So we're going to have to turn the money printers back on again. And it seems like this is the perfect time to do it. Everything's kind of aligning. If you're looking at planets aligning in the skies, this seems to be an economic planet lining sort of month or two that's ahead of us, because all things are meant to push this. If truly they're going to now put all the data centers above our heads in orbit, this is the guy that's going to do it. And all that trillions that was going into the ground-based terrestrial ones, everybody's fighting now, don't take our water, don't take our land, don't take our farmland. This is going to work if the data centers are going to be above our heads. But then that will be outside of human control, where even if you have a problem with it, there's no way to destroy it. It will be outside of literal human intervention at that point.
In Argentina
moves to legalize all non-human corporations run by AI.
So now when we're talking about investing, now you're going to have to start thinking about, do you invest in the future of human ran companies or AI ran companies? And then who runs the AI, right? All of this is happening down in Argentina, by the way, where the guy from Palantir just moved and took his family to go hide. He's also in negotiations buying up water rights. And then if you remember, the Bushes notoriously bought up all the water rights to Argentina a long time ago, basically all the groundwater rights to tap the aquifers there. And right here where I live, the data centers are not seemingly going to happen. And the reason I say that is because A, people don't like it, and there's just zero water. Right now, the Rio Grande is bone dry. There's nothing. You can walk around out there and go look for buried treasure right in the sand. There's no water at all. Going down towards El Paso or Las Cruces, right in the area where they want to place these giant data centers around in my neck of the woods. But keep in mind that the data centers are not the only major investment in the Southwest here. There's also massive detention centers being built. And when I say massive, I mean 400,000 people in big facilities stretching all over the city area of El Paso, Las Cruces, which, by the way, might be America's first megalopolis, which would be like 100 miles straight of urban development, stores, retail, factories, etc., all in a row down the interstate. That would be I-25. And this is the same corridor in which everyone farms in New Mexico because of the Rio Grande. So right now there's a giant fight over a bone dry river and who's going to have the water rights. And that just all aligns with the hike in the prices for everything. How do we drive prices even higher in 2026 and 2027? How do we gain even more profits?
Sassafras was here. 10 pounds of potatoes went up $3 this week from 5 to 8. There's no inflation. No, of course not. It was only at 4.2, percent. They just admitted that it's 4.2 now, not 2 point something. Put that whole subset of what Ransom was talking about for all the genres of people over there as A. But on the backside here, all those people that are pushing all the puzzle pieces around, if you believe there's such a thing, I'm just saying allegedly, there might be, maybe. A lot of research to show there is, a lot of research to show there isn't, that it's just random happenstance. But that money-making edge of things is going to continue. So you can't give total desperation totally to the planet for too long, because people will just drop out and give up. Like they were testing that quite diligently during COVID to see what the reactions were with professional people, what the reactions were with, tradespeople, students, those that were going to retire. They pushed an entire, genre of people into early retirement to kind of open up some slots for the younger kids, whatever. But the money is still going to be there. And with this, I do believe that with this summer of love, there's going to be this back current of massive economic gains during this time for a select few if you're in the right assets. Not financial advice, but I can't see everything going to zero with all this crazy fear and everything around and all these events you're talking about and food prices going up and everything without somebody in the back making a tremendous amount of money off of this. And this is the time that all these fortunes are made, is when there's the most chaos. Like, go back through history. The more chaos there is, the more possibility for making money there is. Because that chaos causes the volatility of the up and down spikes. Like, Trump just was that yesterday or day before said, oh, we got this big ass deal, wars off and everything. That's market manipulation because you saw how quickly the stock market went up 3-4% just on that one couple
Yeah,
tweets.
exactly.
Now, if you can't tell me that's not market manipulation, you have to give me a better definition of what is not, to show me what is not, because that is like in your face, up and center there. It can't be any more obvious now. And then the whole island of the Shazan Island. I don't know if anybody has been watching the Shazan or Shazan, however, depend off Albania there. That whole thing too, to try to control a strategic island coming into the Adriatic Sea from the Mediterranean under the guise of developing $1 billion top 1% vacation resort is kind of ridiculous too. The breakup with some of the most prime real estate and roots and resources on the planet, as Michael Yon always likes to say. And those trade routes have been time immemorial. That Shazan Island is time immemorial as well. That has been held since Phoenician times to control, because it's 50 miles across. You can actually see across over to Italy. You can see literally ships with binoculars going across there. And with today's weaponry and technology, with radars beyond the binoculars, you could knock anything out going into the Adriatic Sea. Like the Venetians needed that as well. It was the most strategic point there. And there's nothing really on it except a bunch of bunkers, underground tunnels, 10 miles of tunnels, thousands of 3,000, 4,000 bunkers, and like a sliver of beach like this big. And they're like, oh, we walked barefoot up to the top of the hill. I'm calling bullshit right away. You guys would have been walking on overgrown trails. Nothing was maintained. There was no sand there anyway. It's rocky and corally. If you've ever been around like Croatia, it's almost like the Adriatic Sea was sculpted out of like a plasma discharge, like on planetary lightning size, where it's ripped out and you got the giant boulders right on the beach edge. And then as you go back further off the coast, the boulders uniform in size start to shrink and shrink all the way to Göbekli Tepe where it's sand. And you got to wonder if that was an ionic wind event after the dispersion and the creation of the Adriatic Sea, if that wind didn't somehow blow and fill in part of Göbekli Tepe, because it was so perfectly, like when you go off the coast and you start looking at the debris size, perfect symmetry, perfect sizing, of different strata, large boulders, medium boulders, small, but all in just layers as you go off the coast for hundreds of miles. And they're walking up there barefoot on these kind of like rocky thing. Now, come on, it ridiculous can't be. But that brings us all the way back over there into the Balkans, What's that? New Macedonia broke away, which was formerly part of Greece. I've been wanting to go to Bosnia anyway to go check out the pyramid. It's on my list for next year. Anybody wants to join? I'm trying to get together a Bosnian pyramid trip. Yeah, and go down in Dubrovnik down there, and we'll hit a few sites and some larger megalithic structures along. And in Albania, there's a couple, and Serbia right downtown also, there's a bunch down there too, star forts and megaliths. That whole area is super, super rich in history.
Somebody said, they were showing it with water down by El Paso. See, so the way the Rio Grande works is we get a lot of flood water, melt off water from the Rocky Mountains. That's when it's really strolling. However, sometimes it dries up, like here. It's dried up around Albuquerque. This is where most of the farming and stuff is, and this runs parallel to I-25 down to El Paso. Now, when you get down there, there's like a little trickle. Now, however, in Texas, they have storms. We have flash floods. So temporarily, you might see water in the river, but as a norm, it's going to be dry. So this is upriver from where you guys were talking about there in the chat. So the water's running out unless we get a really good monsoonal flow, which I think we might. And I think that's what these people are counting on as far as the data centers. And I think that they want, basically, we're going to get this weird combination of space data centers, ground data centers, and underwater data centers in the Arctic, Antarctic. And you got to question yourself, like, is this really just all for processing power? And I would agree that most of it is for computational power, because that's going to decide who runs the world in the near future, if not already. However, the countries of the world, including China and now Iran, have made comments that they're ready to start taking down satellites. Now, you remember a while back where we were kind of debating why it is that Elon Musk basically was putting up disposable satellites, 100 satellites, and then another one, they start to fall out of the sky, and they're easy to attack, right? And the reason for that is because they're so cheap to continually put up. And I have a feeling that they're planning on having little space wars over this idea of who gets to dominate space with computing power. And then I was looking at this too. You were talking about this, about the inflation. There's the excuse. These people that are in charge of things, and you alluded to it when you were talking about how the markets go up and down depending on what Trump's saying about what we're going to be doing. And he's, like 50 times he's gone, we got it, we don't got it, we got it, we don't got it, So each time someone can buy and sell, every time that happens, and make huge amounts of profits that no one even registers on. And then they're going to blame these war stoking, for inflation. But the truth is everything's running out. It already was in that. I believe that this is ongoing from pre-COVID. They already knew that the trends of less food, less packaging, less petroleum, and more restrictions on where and how and who can use the commerce system to trade. And then that's the same time that we started seeing these invisible fleets out there, nomad fleets with no transponders and no way to follow them because they're doing the trade anyway, backdoor, and trying to get out of this. And then you got these billionaires, soon to be all trillionaires, fighting over basically who runs everything. And it looks like, in my opinion, they're just going to drop a big doo-doo on the Northern Hemisphere and restart this whole process in the Southern Hemisphere for decades to come. That's why you see every major tech company, oligarch, rich, billionaire, etc. They're all moving to locations in South America. And so many of these private islands that people are buying up. And like you were talking about a minute ago, there are even people negotiating, to buy big portions of countries to set up future strategic points. And that's basically what the whole Trump administration for this part has been doing. That's why you keep hearing rumors about Greenland, annexing Cuba, annexing Venezuela. It's just to keep everybody out there knowing that we are expanding, we're building new borders. But there's some kind of different system, and it doesn't seem to be the political system that's going to be running that. Subsequent generations are just not learning how to do things. They're not learning trades. They're not picking up the skills that, maybe you or I just might have picked up on accident, just watching people growing up and stuff like that. They're just not getting those kind of experiences, especially children that live in the city. They're getting fed non-useful information in a real world where you have to eat and survive.
Yeah, because that's a North American monsoon. And I did a bunch of research on this over the years. There's a pattern that's a 4,000-year cycle pattern. And what you're talking about, a consistently wet period, is when the last time it was consistently wet enough for major cultures to exist there on runoff water that was consistently, where the river was full 24/7, 365, or never went into a dry period where it dried to that point, was pre-Anasazi. And that was the last time that North American monsoon had pushed that much water. But I do see sort of a shift there where it might be getting wetter, but it's not going to be turned on like next week. It's going to multi-decades for this thing. North American monsoon, anybody out there want to do your own research on that, check it out. It'll show you the flow maps coming off of the Baja Peninsula and how it's more the southern winds where they come now. They go over Northern California, and a lot of that stuff gets driven in Central California and Northern California. The North American monsoon, whatever pattern sets that up, the wind flow comes from below Baja and up into the Four Corners area, and that's the flow. So it dries out further north in Northern California, which would make sense how during the Ice Age there was that gap along the coast there. If there wasn't any precipitation coming down and it was desert-ish up there and now British Columbia and further up into the Aleutians, because of that flow was locked in place, we're just getting a mini version of it outside of an ice age where that flow is really, really far south. You're talking 1,000 miles further south or even more than it exists right now. And that would continually push that moisture there as long as that, jet stream flow was locked in. But that's like a full change in the atmospheric flows. So everywhere on Earth would be different than it is now with dryness or wetness.
Think about this, for example, wrong button. In about 539 AD, you had the worst year ever. But over here in the Americas, it was wet. It was a wet period. So things were very good for the hunter-gatherers that lived in the area here for a pretty good period of time. But then all of a sudden, the Southwest Indians started building grain silos, building buildings, building cliff dwellings, all of these other things. And that happened because the weather changed dramatically. So we know all this other stuff was going on in China and South America and Europe, the Justinian period and all of that stuff. But over here in the Americas, they were doing fine as hunter-gatherers, as nomads. But something happened so severe that they started staying put, building cities, storing grain, storing corn, basically. And, you could tell that there was very hard times happening around that time, all the way up into the point where you have people from other empires coming up here, maybe trying to either conquer or find new lands and new resources. Right here in the Southwest, there's just eras of bone dry death and depression, followed by, monsoonal flooding and lakes and animals and luscious time. So I think that these guys know that there's cycles that you can mark out and map exactly. And I have a feeling that that's what we're seeing when we're seeing the transfer of investment and the building of new infrastructure in all of these places. It's more located, I would say, below the 40th, not the 33rd, but the 40th. It's all below that.
What was the onset period for what you just described? Before the populace was aware. I mean, if they're hunter-gatherers, obviously everybody in unison is going to be aware. But today we're so stratified in terms of society. Like the farmers would be aware first, and those that are in the weather and that sort of thing, precipitation. They would get it second. Grain traders. But you got to wonder, like, when and how fast would that happen to affect enough people? What do you think that 10 years, 20 years, less, more?
I think it's been probably. Well, judging by the era, let's say 539, they think that they started Chaco Canyon probably around 600 AD. So that's less 50, 60 years right there that they were so scared that they decided to start saving grain and changing their entire lifestyle.
That's about where we are on that same timeline, isn't it? From what we would first started talking about this climate debate about 40 years ago. Like, I'd had a really interesting conversation with some people through my years doing this, asking something on the similar line. Okay, all this money that's devoted to the research, is it really for what it is said it is for, or is it to catalog, track, and trace every single of these cycles across the planet in every location? And then now that we have AI to crunch all that data to get specific feeds of specific areas, so they would know which areas would be unrest first because of food production. And that was really what it was, under the guise of something else. Because you can't allot trillions of dollars into something for research, and then people are like, wow, you're doing so much research on the climate. Like, that's crazy. Why do you guys want to? Oh, but if you frame it in a different way, like we must, because it's an existential threat. There were like 10,000 peer-reviewed papers on just the North American monsoon on that 4,000-year cycle.
Well, think about, what you're just saying there, where they take this idea of something and then really they're doing something else. I mean, a good example of that is the 60-year space program that never went anywhere because it really wasn't about that. It was about Cold War. It was about the whole expansion of the military state. It had nothing to do with going into space other than dominating it militarily, or we wouldn't even have built any of the stuff that they were showing the public.
Yeah, some of these movies, that movie Geostorm, not a very good movie. There are a couple action scenes in it of destruction, which I'm always a fan of, that big like destruction stuff on Earth. But the Geostorm, the way those satellites in orbit were actually physically connected together to make a physical cage around the Earth, versus in our mind, what they're trying to sell us is they're all independently floating and orbiting up there. Now, so what if SpaceX puts all these data centers in space, they're going to have radio signal between them uninterrupted and then beam down to the planet. What we're being shown in popular movies is really the truth. You tell me, are we going to create an actual literal physical grid where those data center boxes that are going to be floating in orbit, are those all going to actually be physically connected into larger and larger and larger Lego pieces? You're going to get something that's, an eighth of the size of the Earth, or, with the solar panels up there blocking. So it'll be a continuous eclipse going around the planet every single day as this thing rotates. Like, you can see the International Space Agency move around the planet every hour and a half, like where it's going to be. Imagine if something was a 16th of the size of the planet in orbit with solar panels blocking a 16th of that, and you would know where it would move around every day, and you could watch the eclipse come and go.
They're trying to sell an app right now where you could push a button and it reflects sunlight to you in the night side. They're trying to set up cities that have reflective sunlight on them all night so that they can continue to do stuff. So we're moving out there, and it's kind of like I'm going to give Greg Allison a little credit here. He has what he calls the dark fortress theory, not the dark forest, but fortress, which is that aliens and probably humans, if we really wanted to occupy space, we're not going to be putting up space stations floating in space. We're going to be digging out and putting technology into rock to protect it. Basically, the idea that everybody was worried about with the Oumuamua and Atlas is that, it was some kind of asteroid or structure that had technology in it. But that's exactly what we're about to do. So when we're talking about in the near future going to war in space and knocking out satellites, making junk trails that destroy all of the other satellites, we know that just probably one explosion strategically placed in orbit, in the orbit of the satellites that we use for utility, for telephone communications, for internet and other things, even government relaying of information, they can all be knocked out literally within a period of probably 24 to 36 hours from a domino effect of trashing a whole layer of orbit with space debris. Now, if you push it back out a little bit, or maybe one of our missions pull in a rock, or maybe, there's a rock trailing Earth on the same orbit. It's been there forever. Say you had a big data center there with a bunch of equipment that was totally watching Earth, trailing it nonstop. Do exactly what you're talking about. It's a cage, invisible bars around the planet. The ones down on the ground, they're not really, I don't think, for computing power. It's exactly what you said, tracking and tracing.
Yeah, and we'll continue with the tokenization aspect, because these data centers are not just about tracking and tracing you and running a flock camera. They're about the tokenization of all assets on the planet in a digitized format of literally everything on the planet, all the way down to my remote control here, because there's value in that with the plastic and the component parts that could be recycled. So this will go on the blockchain as well as a digitized item, but you're going to have to run that in real time. So that's really more what the data centers are about. They're feeding you one thing and reasoning. You got to think, with all that digital credit score and track and trace and everything China does, they're doing it with about, let's just round it up and say 500 data centers. And that's for China's behemoth track and trace camera, 1,000 million billion credit scores, instantaneous camera and everything to track everything in real time, everything. That's China, 500. We're going to build 3,500 just in America. All right, so that tells me that we're still trying to retain and control something far greater than just knowing where you're driving your car, what you're posting on social media. It's really about the tokenization and digitization of all things on the planet in real time. And that would include natural forests, fisheries, as well as stocks and bonds and the price movements of everything as it moves down. Your wages, everything will have a tokenized value on it. Like, there'll be nothing on this planet that won't have value associated with it, because that way they can create an entirely new money supply backed by something physical. Now, this SpaceX IPO validates that we have gotten just one gigantic step closer to this rollout of the system of the tokenization, because I think it's in 3 days, the DTCC, which is the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation in America that runs pretty much all stocks, bonds, is going live with their testing of all tokenized securities. Anything in Wall Street that you can find in Wall Street, or anything that you saw in Yahoo Finance, stocks, bonds, ETFs, 401ks, retirement trusts, anything like this, is all going to be tokenized through the DTCC, running and using stellar lumens. Even just the very announcement that they might partner drove stellar lumens from like 8 cents to 25 cents in a couple days. They're not even using it yet. The thing is, every time that let's say you're an issuer of a stock, when you want to issue the stock, you're going to have to lock up 25 tokens to create an individual contract for that stock, and then you're going to put it out. So right now, what are there, like 30,000 different offerings out on Wall Street, including ETFs and all these things? So each one of those are going to have 25 XRP locked in there indefinitely, as long as you're going to issue something on that. So the utilization's real for it, and the fees will be paid using Stellar. And the reason they like Stellar, because it settles pretty much instantly, and there's no carryover on that. And I will say another thing for the XRP Army lovers out there. You got to take a breath of reality here for a second. If I am a company or a country and I'm going to move, let's say, $500 billion, am I going to put it into XRP tokens that can move in price over the 5 minutes or 10 minutes until I get, or an hour or however long it takes? Or am I just going to lock that in RLUSD, where it's a stablecoin token on the Ripple network, where nothing will lose value? It'll still be $1 when it arrives at my destination. So these people that think they're all going to run on XRP, no, these massive transactions are going to be on RLUSD, the stable coin issued by the Ripple and used in the Ripple network and on-demand liquidity ecosystem. You got to be insane if you think these companies are going to try to take that risk on turning it into XRP, traded on an open market, which should go up or down, and then they're going to try to move that much. No, nobody's going to do that. They're all going to be using these things that remain stable. Now, the settlement, Stellar Lumens, that is going to be for the payment of most things. That'll be wrapped into their stable tokens or their contracts, which these tokens, one for one, the banks are issuing their own one-to-one dollar, like a JP Morgan dollar. That transaction between the houses running on the fees will be Stellar Lumens. They're not going to convert it into Stellar and move it over. That's the whole reason all this legislation is coming up with the Clarity Act about stable coins specifically. Because when these companies want to move hundreds of billions, they're going to put it into a stable coin of whatever issuance from a government, a company, a city, or whatever, and then they're going to move it. These tokens will be used for fees and that sort of thing. I agree. And then we got Elon blowing all this stuff up into space right now, where these data centers now are going to reside above us. So this is just the next step to know that this tokenization aspect is moving. I wonder how long it'll take them to get all the data centers up and functional in orbit. And when they do, how long before, because the DTCC is going live along with the Bank for International Settlements, and all central banks on the planet are going live in October of this year. They're starting the testing right now. And they have all these regional hubs. And America, for example, is its own one region. And then that will feed into then the Bank for International Settlements, and they have their own token layers. So nothing's going to be running on what you consider cryptocurrency. It's all going to be tokenized accounts on stable coins. That's the reason they need the Clarity Act. So with Elon launching that up, I think the Clarity Act's coming out pretty quick to be solidified and done with, because I think these two are marching hand in hand together. They need to have a place to store the data, but they need the laws to be able to enable the data to be able to store it somewhere. Like, you can't have both. And I see that comment there. Can they tokenize your property if you own it? That is an unknown. And I saw something about trusts earlier as well. These are unknowns. This is what they're trying to get in this Clarity Act, because you as an individual are still a citizen of a country. You really own nothing unless you can get the original deed to that property back in the early 1800s. You still pay property tax. You are a renter. You're listed as a renter on your property. Even though you own it full out, you are still a vassal of the state, including the United States. You never own anything unless you can get the original property deed issued back. Like I say, most of these property deeds were, say, 1790s to early 1830s. If you can trace it back and get that original deed, that's outside of this system and it can't be included. That's all I know about that. And I do thank you for joining us tonight. Ransom Godwin here along with me, David Dubine, your host, civilizationcycle.com. The world has objectively moved to the point that everybody can see it has taken a different form, or is in the very process of struggling to make a different form of itself, whatever that is coming to be. Now, you could look at anything that's happening worldwide right now, and where's an opportunity that you see in that? I don't know. The things we're seeing around us just reflect that there's a larger cycle happening right now. But so you have to ask, who knew this cycle was coming to prepare? Because it seems like everything's already ready to switch right when this cycle was onsetting. It's kind of weird how those are in tandem. Seems like it was almost known, not planned, known the cycle was coming in. But again, who would have that knowledge to map thousands of years of cycles and not share it with the rest of us?
You were just talking about really how long could it be back there? And this idea is really starting to circulate back into archaeology, and it seems like there have been a group of humans. I'm personally say like 100,000 years at least minimum, but let's just go with 20,000 years. How about that? Or 17,000 years. This new paper out, it's not peer reviewed yet. However, it raises the same argument lots of people have raised about water cycles and how much erosion does it take to tear down, granite and sandstone, diorite, all these different kinds of stones here. And according to this study here, they're saying they're putting the pyramids, which I would say might include farming. I'm just going there. I mean, there's no linkage. I'm adding it myself because I don't see how you could make a monument like this without domesticated animals at least and food for the people, whether they were working from their own fruition or they were forced to work or whatever the case may be. You still have to feed them, which to me means farming. Yeah,
Well, and it would have to be nutritious, well-balanced foods. Because if you're
right.
having the people doing that supposed manual labor, as we're told, chipping all that stone, they'd have to be well-fed, full of calories, a lot of protein in there, and it'd have to be incredibly balanced because they would just be the ultimate carving machine.
And that's all really that this is a new argument about the erosion, saying it can't possibly be only 4,600 years old. It must be at least 15,000 years or more. That's agreed upon by a lot of geologists now. It's not really the only thing really holding this number from going ahead and going to where the evidence says it is a group of Egyptologists and people that write history books. I mean, they don't want to have to rewrite books and know that their books were completely false because they just didn't know. But you were talking about how long it kind of takes for planning to go on. How long do you think it even took to plan something like the Great Pyramid itself, especially if you're supposed to assume that, which I can't assume that because of the level of technology, but that's the idea that these are less technologically advanced people in the far remote past, whether it's 5,000 years, 15,000 years, 20,000 years, either way, they would have had to plan it for hundreds of years even before getting started. And it would have took a long time to build it. A lot of food, a lot of manpower. And we're not even claiming that humans were doing much more than scratching their butt and living in caves at 20,000 years ago.
At best. And it asks you, the main question to be asked is why now? Why is this information coming now? I read that book back in, was it 94, 95, Graham Hancock, when it first came out, man. It was the earth-shattering book. Truly, it meant earth-shattering book. Fingerprints of the Gods. The very first one that challenged everything that was ever written that all the academia controlled. That came out, it blew minds away. Why now, though? So they'd been ridiculing all these people talking about the same, Robert Schoch as well. He's talking about erosion on the Sphinx, water erosion that dates it to about that same time, like 18,000 years ago, 18 to 21,000 years ago. It was like the research from Robert Schoch that shows water erosion. And I am telling you unequivocally also that this interglacial, these 10,000 years, it was forested around 6,000 years ago all across northern Africa. You could take a boat from like Yemen across the Red Sea into like Ethiopia and the Sudan and take a river system all the way over to West Africa out to the Atlantic Ocean. That's how different it was than it is today. Full of forests, estuaries, wetlands, gold trading routes. The Aksum were trading at their later stages with the Ghana Kingdom across through Middle Africa now, which was a mega lake drying out. About maybe, think of a Great Lake in today's terms, but half full. That's what was left over as it was drying out some 6,000 years ago. It was actually at its apex at 7,000. That's how different it was. So talking about that, then that has to re-explain our entire human history. So how much distraction could that create if all of a sudden the hubbub is pyramids are 20,000, 18,000 years old? Oh, there's all these experts. They talked about it. We just misdated them and made fun of them. It's all good now. Their research is the most valid. You all old dinosaur people back in the universities in your crusty basement with cobwebs, you're out. You had all the wrong information. You're outdated. Like, see how they could snip those people off right there. You talk about job reduction, snip. Okay, your information's old. All these new people, But what would that do to reset humanity? And at the same time that gold and silver, the most ancient of money, see, that's how it all ties back together. It's ancient money. It's tying back into the collapse and hyperinflation. And now we're coming back into the ages that are unbelievably to think of, at least, well, for a lot of people, 20,000 years. How could that be? And, I'd like to touch on your point in a minute here about what did the people in the last ice age do? That 10,000 years of warmth between the last ice age, warm period, ice age, now warm period. We had the same 10,000 years as those people about 118,000 years ago. What did they do for 10,000 years, 118,000 years ago? That's what I want to know too. Like, what kind of tech did they develop in those 10,000 years of warmth?
It's hard to believe that nobody was doing nothing for periods of thousands of years, right?
Impossible.
I mean, I can buy, the standard cataclysm model of being set back. However, obviously, we've never been set back all the way. In other words, each era had leftover knowledge, literature of some form, maybe oral tradition, but they also were taking over some layer of technology, obviously, because at different stages, we seem to have lost that technology, mostly, when you point to the megalithic stuff. And were they dealing with all these same problems, world wars, inflation of their monies and stuff? Do they just recycle this idea until the civilization collapses, start over, introduce new money, a new system, but really it's the old system, and they just ride the cycle again?
And they lie about the history. The thing you'd have to do is disappear the history, change the history, so it wouldn't be, you put two and two together pretty quick, right? If you had all the true history. Yeah, they have to destroy it, the past, the last of it. So anything that was like 16th century, so like say from the 14 to the say 1700s, all those amazing cathedrals and buildings, they had to destroy every one of them. It took 2 world wars to do it. It's taken, the last 50 years of construction or upbuilding or upgrading to get rid of the rest. Oh, there's fires here, there's all kind of disasters in that. But going on that lane of just like how it's so far off. Everything's like a Six Sigma even thought these days. You got Six Sigma thoughts everywhere now. But the cherry on top, I guess, to put into this Six Sigma event, the Bank of England said you need to adjust your stock portfolio for an alien invasion. Not the Onion, serious. That's what. And then I started to think, like, what is the alien? Is it AI? Is it like, what is it? Is it interdimensional? Is it actually extraterrestrial? What is this alien invasion? Is it nanoparticulate? I mean, what is it? But for the Bank of England to come out and say you need to prepare for an alien invasion and adjust your stock portfolio, that's pretty, right up there with gold and silver going the highest in as intraday trade ever. And then I got smashed back down and then it went right back up. It's something's very broken, which I thank you for putting the charts up here, Ransom. What do you think of them now when you see that? It's a Weimar Republic and the US dollar on silver price. A lot said, but go ahead.
I'm just thinking, where and when is the peak on these things? Because, always after the peak is the inevitable trough. At the bottom, the dip. And that's when all the wealth transferring actually happens, not the zeros and ones, but the actual properties, the metals. I'm looking over there in the Middle East. We're moving all of this stuff over there. It's been a kind of a long ride. They've been slow rolling it, but World War III is still on the table, but it might not take form in what we're used to or what we're expecting to see, which is, like World War II trenches and, everybody getting blown up and artillery and tanks. It's not even going to be that kind of thing. They're just going to be massive amounts of small localized skirmishes with AI and drones until they just take property. And then the maps just change slowly. And we're already seeing that. We're going to see, I'm going to say within the end of this summer, no more Cuba, or at least the Cuba thing that's going on there, that's been going on there for decades. That's going to morph into something else. And Iran is going to morph into something else. And that's going to be sooner than later. This all ties into the transfer of wealth, the oils, the straits, the trade agreements to allow goods to flow by and through the ports. So that's the contracting that's all changing. And it looks like, we've basically in some way or another taken Greenland as an asset. So I would say that that's pretty much a done deal. We're putting troops there as we speak. We're going to spread out. We're going to offer business and mining and all kinds of stuff. It's going to look a lot like what we're trying to do in Venezuela as well, which is revamp a new economic system. It's just a question of, will we as middle class or lower class in the terminology of the West be allowed to participate in the economic boom and growth that'll happen after the trough? And I don't think it is, because today, all day, everywhere I looked, I kept seeing the UBI idea. You know what? These AI are so good, you can still get paid. This is the deal they're offering now with the companies. You can just go home. You can still get paid. The AI system and algorithms that you help create will pay you. So if you're in the era right now that's part of it, you'll get a UBI, which is, I mean, they're going to call it something else, but basically it's a universal basic income for them to just go ahead and stay home. And then if you don't have stock or some kind of claim in any company, this is where the peasant basically, or the middle class, get bypassed. So there's going to be specific reasons at first to give out the UBI. It's not just going to be because, you know, you're out on the street with some addictions and you're hungry and you're cold. That's not really who they're going to offer it to. Right now, they're offering it to all the people that they want to just stop working, because they don't want this massive wave of realization to humans realizing that unskilled jobs, or jobs that aren't really that hard, or jobs that are in the cyberspace, are all being replaced, all of them. Amazon's firing tens of thousands of people every 2 months. I've been keeping track. It was like 100,000, then they let go of 20,000. I've seen another one today about 16,000 more. So more and more jobs are just going to get replaced. And this goes mostly where you're going to see it first is in government and the way that commerce runs. So the AI is going to now take care of everything that usually you would hire 10, 15, or 20 people to do. It's going to do it. But the problem is it's still faulty and vulnerable. So I don't know how they're going to really sell it on people. So what I think is about to happen is an explosion in brand new trades, brand new skills, and things to get around this AI nightmare. So people are already hungry for it in the entertainment world. It was like a novelty idea. It came out. Now it looks too real, and people are trying to avoid that. They don't want the AI slop. They want to see something real in the world. And more, and let me tell you this story before we get back to the money. They're literally taking all this science that they gathered during the 90s and early 2000s, from the consumers, from the product buyers, from the viewers, from the all of the little areas in which that they take metadata from to find out how you think. They're now reversing that. They know what people think, what's averagely attractive or normal. And if someone doesn't fit that, they just switch the image. And I thought, you know what? They got busted. That's funny. So we're watching, I think it was Estrella TV, and they're using these AI photos of people, and those aren't even the people. If the video footage wasn't real. So now when they tell you that your dollar's not worth nothing because this thing happened somewhere in the world, and now you're looking at some grainy video of some event that supposedly happened, and they're telling you that this is the reason that we're about to go to war, or they're closing somebody's borders, or that the price of oil or silver or gold or something either skyrocketed or dipped. You can see how the entire thing's an AI run system already. We're already living in it. I think we were even maybe 5 to 10 years behind on even trying to realize what was happening.
Yeah, I wonder if we look back 10, 15 years ago, if there's AI stuff that we would recognize as AI now. Back then, some of the things that we looked at that we did, that it's really much more advanced. It's 10, 15 years ahead of us. They're just giving it to us. That'd be interesting for somebody to look back at it. But if I could speak on-demand pricing for a second and right into this AI generative, and it goes right into this hyperinflation chart. It goes all the way back to 1803. But notice that from 1803, there's hardly any inflation in the dollar when we were using sound money. So if this is any indication of what's happening, it's happening everywhere. And I absolutely tell you, it's happening to all metals and minerals and everything. I was looking at like a coin melt value site, and it showed that the penny is now, the full copper penny is worth about 4.5, almost 5 cents. And a nickel right now is worth about approximately 8 cents, like 7.9 cents, not quite 8. Just because the copper value inside our old coinage. And then everything you look at, the uranium prices are going up. Anything you can think of. And I'm just going to say what's behind that. The one step behind that is food, because we're at 3-year highs on the energy right now. Energy's going up. It may not be the crude. They're trying to deflect you with the crude oil and the whole Venezuela thing. But who's looking over at the natural gas prices? Like the natural gas prices doubled during this last storm. And everybody's power bills are going to be exceptionally high because they had to go on the open market with like 18 states bidding with no budget for that same electricity so their people don't get put into the dark. And they're going on how many 100 megawatt hours we're purchasing out there from the power providers. But the natural gas at that time was twice as expensive for that extra generation. So that's just going to get passed on to you because that's the price they had to pay. Well, it's an inflated price, and that's going to get passed right on to you. So look for giant higher electric bills coming up. January is going to be a shocker for a lot of people. Distant warning, nobody scans the back of your driver's license. Dynamic pricing gives you the zip code that you live in, and it knows your approximate home value. Now, just based on that one singular piece of data, let alone if you've had prior interaction with the store and you've bought things and they've rung you up once and you used a credit card to attach to that. Now they got your credit, the what you've bought in the store, what you were willing to spend on items, and they know the value of your home if they scan the back of your license. So they're starting to build a financial profile on you. And are you being charged the same at the register when you quickly grab things? It's almost like you need to write everything down on the tag. And then when they scan it, you need to immediately check to see if the price is the same, because there's all these videos about people buying meat. It's not the same price. It's not the same weight that's on the labels. And I'm just thinking, are we, and is this the future that we have? Because if you did about 3 weeks ago, they did a report on dynamic pricing, and generally supermarkets were earning an extra 3 to 8% on their revenue by using dynamic pricing. What they can build on you publicly and what you publicly give them. And that's the whole thing about these cashiers. Just by handing you the thing to even check out if you want to buy anything that needs an ID, you instantly have to allow them to scan your ID, and you're not giving them the permission to do it. They're just grabbing it as fast as they can. Also, another thing with that, putting you into a financial category that they think you'll pay more for this item, and they are absolutely rounding up. I heard a manager say they're rounding up now, and I'd heard this too, since they're disused and they went away from pennies, they're rounding up. Now, if you go onto the store, you still see like $3.99 items. So think about that, the way the pricing would be dynamically, because the label would be different. So they have a 4-cent wiggle room on each price of every single item in the whole store. If they're going to round up on you every single one because of your financial profiling, that's how they're making their extra 3 to 8% in the industry. That extra wiggle, 4 cents. Right now it's 4 cents. What's it going to be when they do away with the nickel? A whole 10 cents they can play with? You get charged 10 cents more on every single item that you buy just because you're in a certain financial category that they've tagged you on, because your zip code and your property taxes are associated to that zip code. Therefore, your home value, or you must make twice as much as those people over there. And then one last thing, Ransom, on this. Walmart would also be working into conjunction if they scan the ID to see if it is a real ID or just an old-fashioned ID. Because a lot of people in Tennessee are like, I'm not getting the real ID. But that's in the state of Tennessee, so that's a Tennessee-specific database. See, if Walmart scans your ID, that goes into their entire United States system, and then that information shared and says they don't have a real ID yet. That's the danger of this. It's far outside when you get into the multinationals, especially, and they're all in all 50 states. Then that data is shared. Well, one AG will requested that they can get that, or okay, we have to open the database. So when your corporations like Home Depots and Walmarts are scraping your data, all of the drugstores and dollar stores are doing this in Michigan, going on a year in a row. Thanks for the extra info on that.
And somebody else said something about the dollar store, which I know for a fact. That is their store policy. They want to collect that information. And the reason that they do that is because they sell that information to third parties, including medical research groups and things, who then pass on that information once again to your healthcare providers. And it's not happening yet, but you've seen how socialist healthcares around the world. So it's not too far-fetched to figure out that they're collecting that information so that they could start cutting people off. And that kind of wraps back around to this idea of what are we going to actually start doing here besides, creating your own food. But how are you going to pay these bills?
You hit on
If
that. Well, if you're getting AI, you'll never ever be able to save any money, and that'll put you perpetually in what you talk that surf class, where you're at the however many, let's say 100 million people get on that UBI. There's no way for them to save anything, and if that prices ever go off, they take that system away. They literally have no net at all. That's
Yeah,
scary, man.
and then the other thing was like you were talking about, the IDs and scanning it for different prices. I recently went to a mall. I did notice that when I went through the stores, there was no prices on anything at the mall, right? And malls
Mm.
generally are closing across America, but it shows you the corporate future of what all stores are going to be like. There's no prices. You have to scan things, and if you scan it, that links it to that personal price range that you may be getting.
And online shopping too. I mean, they got you even more wired, because if you're using a credit card, you're actually giving your banking details then. And if there's
Right.
somehow like a third-party API that plugs in that they share that data, then they could see what your category risk is for the bank of either lending you and giving you some credit if you're taking on some debt for something, or if there's some way to see if they consider you a preferred client because you always have this much in your bank account. There's always this much. It never deviates. It never goes ever below this much. So you're this category of person, like, what kind of data can they siphon off of that by knowing your credit card, working with a third party provider, as they call them?
This universal basic income is going to work into this other idea of having your ID and your medical history and your travel and everything all on this digital biometrics. Excuse me. I don't know why I went brain dead, but that'll be all tied in here. And, this whole article talks about how great it is that this lady, she's 27, she gets to stay home. She gets so much money per month now, and she just chooses how to spend it. But what they leave out is what you said right there, is you're going to have to choose to spend it on bills. That's what's going to
That's
happen.
1,500
You're going to
barely
have rent, bills. Those
in
things,
America anymore.
those things aren't going to go away. They're only going to go up. So you're going to have to increasingly have a reason to have a bigger UBI every month for, depending on who you are, for your needs, right? But that's not what it's catering to. This is like a snack to trick you into thinking you're going to get a good dinner. This is like the free bread at the table at Olive Garden to fill you up, where you're going to overspend thinking you're hungry, but you're not here. That's kind of like this, except for the dinner's never going to come at the end. You just get the snack every month. It's just a snack because, like you said, it'll just work out to just how much you need on bills and maybe a little food. And you might be able to buy a trinket off of Amazon, but you're not going to be able to, maybe invest in a portfolio or buy a house or, things like that will actually promote security for your financial future. Those things are going by the wayside. You're going to see one of these programs come out and they're going to pitch it like, hey, look, you're not on welfare. You've got a universal basic income. You're not on welfare. This isn't help. This is just, you deserve this. But the problem is obviously 9 billion people can't take this much out of any system and it be worth anything once it's divided by everybody, right? So it's a bait and switch. So what they're going to do is they're going to offer all this while the jobs disappear. And then one day they're just going to say, well, you know what? Like, we have to close the government, which they're about to probably do again in January, because we can't pay things. I'm sorry about that, but you can't get your universal basic income for a while here.
So let me comment on that for a second, that $1,600 there, because you have to think about, how is that money coming in? Okay, well, the government's selling debt, and then they're just getting money for free, payable 30 years in the future, 20 years in the future, to pay you $1,600 now. All right, so where's this coming from? Who's buying this debt? So $1,600, I would look at it that, and I would say, okay, so I'm going to get this every month, right? I can get this each month,
Yeah,
but I
that's
can't
the
have another
idea.
job. I can only take this, and that's it. Well, they
Like
give it to you
the
extra
rules.
in addition to your job in the beginning for like the first 3-year bonus ransom. You got to get on it.
Yeah, and this is actually, I think it was for several years. It was a deal like a yeah, you know what it was like? It was like whenever you get fired and they give you they give you a
Severance.
nice severance check to take home.
It's a
And
nice severance check. I don't know what world you're living in, my friend.
no, but that's basically what it is. It's to tie people over so that they don't realize the
You're
impact
laying
of
on
all
your
the
feet.
job losses.
So wait,
You know,
let me go back to the $1,600. I was trying to formulate a thought here. Like, I would use that 1,600 to make money.
yeah.
So I'm looking at, so I have a farm here. So I look at that, go $1,600. All right, how much would you pay somebody to come out and help you with just general farm work, nothing super specific. We plant here, we need to dig this up, we need to put the poles in, we need to chainsaw, and this thing goes in the truck, we need to move the rocks, whatever. Like 16, how much would you think per hour on just a regular farm work like that? Give me a number.
What you could do with $1,600 on a
Yeah, in
farm?
terms of labor, like if you could hire somebody else out to come and help you, how much would you charge per hour to do that physical labor of that a farm? $10, $15, $20, divide that 30 if you know how to do woodwork or whatever, but divide that by 1,600. How many hours do I get? If somebody else helping me, would save 25% for materials. And then I'd have a second person help me build something out, whether it be plant more trees that produce more fruit, chainsaw more things and split it into logs to sell cords of wood, just anything to help hire somebody else to help me build out the farm more. So that's the way my direction will go with it. I'm looking at that's like free money for me to get more resources to help me do more on the physical realms around the farm.
Well, I mean, that is a nice idea, but obviously they're going to stop with, it's not going to be an open-ended payment. It's just going to be a trick. But with $1,600, I'm sure you could get one employee just $12, $13 an hour to get 80 hours out of them before you had to do that again. If you did it about what, $10 an hour, there's 100 hours right there. So if you paid them a little more, it's going to decrease in hours. That's why I said about 80 hours at $11 or $12 per hour. And then, they're going to stand around looking at their phone and waiting.
That's why you need to be there with them. I found that when I hire people, I absolutely need to be with them. That's the whole point, though, is I want to do that, but it's going to take me 4 times longer just by myself or just one other person helping me and directing them along. I know what I'm doing. All right, help me lift this. Okay, this bitch,
I've always found that never works out. The one guy that you get that doesn't know what you're doing and you have to explain everything every time. It ends up being that you're paying yourself to babysit someone else instead of them doing their own thing and you doing your own thing. You end up doing their thing because they don't know how to do it. So
that's
you're
why
just
trying to get people who know how to do things first. That's the whole point of having a skill. I would hire somebody with a skill like you just said. That's perfect. You have a skill and you understand how to do. I will hire you so much faster. You make your head spin. I'm doing exactly what you said. Training somebody how to do. You don't even know how to run a chainsaw.
That's the problem, right?
You're running a saw and helping clean up the forest, but it's the first time you've seen a chainsaw. No, I want somebody who's already sawed, knows what a log ox is, knows how to leverage something. Literally leverage.
Now you're only talking 20 or 30 hours a month now if you got that person that knows how to do things.
Yeah, they cost more money, wouldn't they?
Yeah. They got their own UBI, supposedly, which you can see how the money becomes worthless after no time at all when everybody's getting the same thing. This is a project for all the viewers. You too, David. Hook up your antenna, watch the local TV, and then count out how many things that they're asking for money because they have a formula that they figure you have at least $20 a month you could give to them, whether it's cancer, the veterans, the puppies and kittens. It doesn't matter. It'll be 63 cents a day. And every few months, that number changes to like 64 or 65 because they're using an algorithm to figure out exactly how many cents they could pull off of someone for about $20 a month. So say you feel bad for 3 of those things. I like veterans, those poor cancer kids, the poor animals. Now you're dishing out $60, which is 63 times 3 per day. And then they're going to round it up, like you were saying before. All of that stuff's going to end if people are getting universal basic incomes because they're going to realize they never get ahead. So that's why I was saying we're about to have a renaissance, I think. The more of these jobs go to AI, the more real people with time are going to sit there and invent new products and new things and new services that circumvent that AI system.
And because the Strait of Hormuz continues to be, closed down, open, close, nothing's really moving out of there. Let's look at the Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO. Screen grab here, fertilized and non-fertilized crops. Now you can see the difference between the two. Now add in a heat dome, extreme dryness, and we'll see where our crops are because the heat, the dry, and the no fertilizer, that's a triple whammy. That's what we're getting pretty much in every breadbasket across the Northern Hemisphere. And the FAO even telling you there are going to be lower yields. Get ready for it. These images here, southeast of Yorkton and Saskatchewan, massive floods across the farm fields. Again, the harvest on this, not going to really be doable. So either it's the heat or it's the dryness or it's the floods in other places. We're getting it from all directions here. So as you can see, every 1%, 2%, 0.5% chipped away across all these nations growing food. And so far, on the lowest ball estimate I have seen anywhere this year is a crop forecast, although the FAO even says it's going to be at least negative 1.9%. Most estimates I've seen have been between 8-14% globally. So the FAO coming in at the most minimal losses. Maybe they don't want to spook everybody with their policy and decision makers. Global wheat stocks decline as U.S. production hits multi-decade lows. That should be century lows, lowest in 150 years. Looking at a minimum 22% decline. That's what I'm saying. The FAO is just a little bit off. And then if we look on the right side, global wheat balance, there we go, 36% decline. That's a little more like it. And we're running this fine line between organizations trying to put some stability in the markets and not spook everybody versus the reality on the ground and truly what we need to prepare for. There's that huge disconnect, the Grand Canyon of what is and what will be, possibly. I'm bringing this information because if this indeed does pan out the way it looks like it's going to be, everything that's already far higher in price than it was since the pandemic is going to continue higher up in price. How are you going to prepare for that extra food cost is the whole point here. You're going to have to get ready for that because the Hormuz Strait does not look like it's going to open. Far too late for the fertilizer applications anyway. We're not going to get there this year. Next year, possibly. Now we're running on the fuel edge of things. Diesel's going to get really expensive during the harvest season. We're just getting everything culminating at once. So you're going to need an action plan. And let's look at the vegetable oil prices. Palm oil, soy oil, sunflower, rapeseed oil, up. From looks like around 1,000 USD a ton will be generous right there, all the way up to almost 1,750 across the board. Another input cost skyrocketing, up 75%, and then that's going to be pushed in, and they'll take an extra couple cents from you across the supermarket on everything you buy just because of this. And what's so interesting about this global agricultural supply coming from the Goldman Sachs investment research arm, the food that's produced is in such a small amount of producers. Because if we look at corn, the lion's share of corn is produced in the green, the red, and the blue. And on the right there, you'll see Argentina, Brazil, and the United States. A center column, soybeans, Brazil is the lion's share, obviously. So if one country were to have a problem, then we all have a problem. And if we go over to rice, I know not a lot of people eat rice in the U.S., although we produce it down in Arkansas. The gray bar, not a large staple in the U.S., but around the world, it's a major food staple. So if, for example, India has a great problem with fertilizer and labor disputes and supply chain issues like they've had, well, that's literally all your eggs are almost in one basket, which is kind of scary. And if we look at palm oil production, Indonesia, Malaysia taking care of that, but that's been expanding in plantations for a while, even though the ecological debate rolls around that one heavy. And then sugar, Brazil. So soybeans and sugar. If something happens in Brazil, we lose, a lion's share of the global production of that. And another nugget off the FAO, they're talking about low-income food deficit countries, meaning really poor places that can't grow enough food. As Sam Kinison would say, if you're living in the desert, move. 1.4% increase, but I'm going to say that's really, really, really low because here's the map that accompanies the story, and they're showing you at least 4 nations out of Africa with the numbers of these into the tens of millions, and 1.4%. I don't know if that number is going to stick, but it seems like a lot of people are having a lot of problem. Retail prices, sorghum in the Sudan on the left, up and up. And the price of corn, edible corn, maize in Kenya and Uganda, up and up and up. So if you're feeling it at home here in America and Canada and parts of Europe where it's getting really pricey to go out and get a basket of groceries, and you notice they shrunk in the cart sizes, I encourage you to look next time you go in, see if you're receiving the same size cart as you were, say, 3, 4, 5 years ago. Because a shopping cart's been standard for like 50, 60 years, are always the same size. I encourage you to go look and see places like Kroger, Publix, etc., and see if the carts have shrunken. You're going to be shocked. It's not the mini carts that you're pushing, it's just the regular carts. They got to disguise it. Oh, it's half a cart of groceries. Not of the old size, it's not. Understanding the drought impact of El Nino. Getting into some ocean-related things here. Now, this is a good one I pulled off Ryan Maue over on X, putting this one out, Southern Oscillation Index. And you see, we've already dipped far into the, we got to go back a couple decades territory, but we're going to be rolling back 80 years on this one here. Bringing it up with the newest July 15th. Readings off the coast of South America, starting to get a little warm out there, but it's just coastal. As you see, as we pull offshore halfway to Indonesia, we're still waiting for that water to warm up with the air, the flow pushing in there, bringing it to the surface, but we'll see. A little bit of update though. So they're showing October to December 26, an 81% chance of a very strong El Nino. Now, again, a lot of people are paying it in at the 75-year, 80-year event, not the bring us back to 1877, 150-year event, but nonetheless. Bars are there to make it super easy to see. I'm not even going to circle anything on the chart. Your eyes should just be able to easily see this. So at the bottom there, August, September, October, looks like we're really getting into it, but September, October, November, December seems at the peak max there, which means a heap ton of snow for the Southeast US. If you like snow, you got it this year. And off zero head, strongest El Nino in 75 years, sets off food supply chain alarm bells, ding, 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 ding. Most powerful, more than 75 years. A threat to critical food supply chains, which are already vulnerable to drought, flooding, export restrictions, on again, off again conflicts. So that's your distant early warning for food. You can clearly see that something's wrong with the food supply, and not a lot of the forecasters are putting it out there because, again, I'm very much of similar opinion, but I try to bring you the information. If you put this on the front page of every newspaper and every magazine article, and you had it on the 5 o'clock news, 6 o'clock news, food shortages, you're going to cause an artificial panic. They're just going to wait until the harvest come in, and whatever happens, happens. They're not going to really give you a warning that it's happening until it hits the news, and then they've already validated that there's no way to get around it, and you're really going to see it, so might as well tell you then. But if you notice, even when hurricanes or typhoons come in, you can see with really good radars now and different types of atmospheric flow maps, you can see a typhoon coming 7 days out. Blizzards, this sort of thing, extreme Arctic cold, record heat, whatever. But the news will wait until less than 48 hours before they tell you the same thing that they knew about 7 days prior. This is something that's constant across all the news feeds as you go through different seasons and you're looking for different events. They never tell you, even though they know it is coming. It's always the last 48 hours. Then nobody's prepared. Well, why didn't you tell us 7 days ago? We wouldn't have the shortage in the supermarkets, everybody running and fighting for a bottle of water. 7 days could have restocked those stores. Everybody would have had a plenty. But why'd you wait that long to tell people? It's the same thing. You're not going to get any warning. It's just going to be prices up, something happened, whoops, and then you're on your own. So I highly suggest you get some sort of plan B in motion right now. Moving on to the smoke spread for you World Cup fans out there. New York blanketed, hazy, brown, smoggy. But this is the flow, and you can expect that deep dark purple to be affecting people as it moves around. And I got the forecast here for you for the smoke moving out through the next 3 to 4 days, and you can see it breaks, and then it resurges itself, and it's going to push further south into Tennessee. Apparently, this time it's going to go straight into the southeast. Now, some incredible images coming out as our air quality is, well, less than could be good. A lot of toxics in the air. Be careful if you're out there in any of those zones. Some images coming out just at the daybreak here where you can see the fire in the forest. Coming off of NOAA here, some satellite views for you. Edge of Fire, Coyote Fire, Brewer Fire, East Evans Creek. There's a fair few others up there as well. Apparently they're not anywhere really under control. Talking about 6 million hectares, almost 12 million acres burned already, and it's just gonna keep on going. Here was a real interesting one. Boat fleeing from the smoke, but we've seen a lot of these. Saw the train conductor guys stuck in a cab there. A lot of people trying to get away by boats on the different lakes, or just going out in the middle of the lake and chilling until the fumes or the smoke and the fire passes. And a glimpse from the air here for you, and you can see that. Pretty hectic overall. Just taking a 30,000 foot view, which we just did, even higher because of the satellite. But halfway through 2026, good news for us. The record low global burn, although it's happening in Canada. Luckily, between the years 2012 and 2025 is your average. Comparatively to that years, which there were a lot more fires, we are, well, that blue line at the bottom, luckily, because these wildfires are so fast, they've damaged a lot. Wildlife, towns, these sort of things. Glad it is lower than normal this year. At least there's some good news to come out of that. So the overall, as soon as Canada kind of extinguishes, whether there be some rain coming in or not over the next, I don't know, days, weeks, months, we'll see how long it goes. Air, food, and water. We've seen lots of problems with the water. A lot of different facilities need that for cooling, and there's all these things going on with water restrictions, and huge community battles over water. Now we got the air, and we got the food. Those three things in the human domain that keep us alive are all under threat at the moment, all at the same time. That's the biggest takeaway from this. All three, all at once. So you've had some time to get ready. I do wish you the best in your preparations. Please join me on Patreon, Subscribe Star. I've been throwing some posts up there. Going to be trying to whip out a video or so of the things I cannot put up here on YouTube to explain a little more of this. Subscribestar.com/adapt2030 and also patreon.com/adapt2030. And as always, thank you so much for your valuable time. Please hit that subscribe button. You got to click the notification bell, share with your friends and family. Feel free to chop this up and make it into shorts to share across your social media. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.